Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Reap the Spoils. I'm Mark Sullivan.
I'm Delaila Lugo.
And I'm Jason Kwasnicki.
Hey, Delilah, what game are we talking about today?
Dragon's Dogma 2.
We're gonna spoil Dragon's Dogma 2. Reap the Spoils is a spoiler cast, mostly monthly, where we'll play a game or we'll watch a thing, usually related to video games, and we will come back here and spoil it. We're going to talk about it from the story to the gameplay to everything that the game had to offer. So, if you haven't played Dragon's Dogma 2, and maybe some light spoilers for the original Dragon's Dogma, just some stuff that I gleaned from doing some reading. If you haven't played mostly Dragon's Dogma 2, I highly recommend you pause the episode, go and play that game, and then come back and listen to us spoil it.
Yeah, it's like a book club, folks.
It's like a book club. Yeah. And we're going to you know what we're going to do at the end of the episode? Jason just found this out. It's in the notes. I put the game that we're talking about in the next episode at the end of the show and at the end of our notes. And, if you listen to this episode, listen to the end, you find out what we're talking about next month, and you go and play that game or watch that thing and then come back to us in a month when we'll talk about that.
We play it together.
And then much like Dragon's Dogma 2, the cycle continues. It repeats itself. The next episode, I'll tell you at the end of the episode what we're playing next. It's crazy.
So bad.
Some information about Dragon's Dogma 2. It released pretty recently on March 22nd, 2024 for the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC. It was a sequel, believe it or not. Dragon's Dogma 2. The 2 is not just there for show, not to have two letter I Roman numerals to make the title all fancy and stuff. No, it's a sequel to Dragon's Dogma, or Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, which was a re-release that had basically a built-in expansion with a whole new dungeon and additional stuff. That game came out in 2012. Dark Arisen came out in 2013. And Dragon's Dogma 2, much like the first game, was directed by Hideaki Itsuno, who some people might know as the savior of Devil May Cry. And also involved with both games was a lot of Devil May Cry staff, a lot of other Capcom staff too involved. With Dragon's Dogma 2 in particular, the big names that I would point out are just trying to find the name. Daigo Ikeno, who is the art director for Devil May Cry as well as Dragon's Dogma 2, and Bingo Morihashi, who was a lead scenario writer for most of Devil May Cry ever since I think Devil May Cry 3, and obviously the lead scenario, or one of the lead scenario writers for this game. Lots of Devil May Cry staff, lots of other Capcom staff. Also, this game was developed and built in the RE engine, which I'm sure pretty much every Capcom game nowadays.
I was going to say that.
That's just their resident engine. No pun intended there.
Yeah, no, I'm sure they poured so much money into that. They're gonna milk that. Capcom's on a roll.
All things considered, the RE engine is a bit of a beast. It's very versatile. It's very pretty. Yeah, I don't blame them for using that
in
with
first person and third person. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So, all right, are you guys ready to talk about Dragon's Dogma 2?
Yes.
Let's go.
Final spoiler warning. We're going to spoil Dragon's Dogma 2. So if you haven't played it, pause the episode, go play it, and then come back here. It's like it's an interesting game in terms of length. It can either take you like 25 hours or it can take you 85 hours, depending on what you decide to do in this game. So it's really interesting seeing the gap on how long to beat. A lot of people reported around those same times for just main story or completionist route, or even just like main and extra. It's like you really get out of it what you put into it, I'd say.
Yes.
So that all being said, what did you guys put into it? We all got the true ending, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or we all eventually saw that. I'm assuming we all saw the regular bog standard boring ending, didn't we?
Yeah.
Well, if you do the true ending, you do have to see the quote unquote false ending or regular ending.
That's technically true. Yeah. So I mean, let's break down the let's break down the plot of this game, which kind of just really heavily goes into the lore of this world, or worlds as it were. It's funny. I feel like last episode we talked about how much I mean, I guess without going into too many spoilers for the game that we last spoke about, but talked about how much we're not huge fans of like these multiple parallel worlds and stuff like that. And here we are playing another game where that's like integral to the lore and kind of the whole story.
Mhm.
Um so basically, like Dragon's Dogma 2 is a one of many parallel universes to like the first game, and realistically that's just the nature of this world. And there's this cycle that's perpetuated by the dragon who is created to destroy the world, but also creates the Arisen. Just basically chooses, whoever's gonna oppose it, and the Arisen's whole goal is to kill the dragon and save the world. Which eventually leads to the creation of another dragon to then oppose it again. It's a little
Yeah.
confusing to wrap your head around at times. But how did you guys feel about just like that general cycle and that the general reveal and kind of observation of that plot point?
I didn't particularly care for the plot point as much as I did the different towns' perception of that plot point. Like, I think it was Back Batal. I'm gonna butcher everything. Um, that like perceived the Arisen as like this bad thing because it meant the end of the world, whereas the Arisen's like revered in Vermund, right? They're like
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
sovereign.
he's the
Well,
king. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
the Arisen is just by default the leader of Vermund.
Yes.
They like that's
Totally
how much
divine, right? Yeah.
yeah, that's how they view the Arisen. And it is another big I feel like for the first half of the game, um the plot is mostly you and the captain of the guard, Brant, being in opposition to this false sovereign that has taken the throne. And that seems to be less he wanted it and more he was being manipulated and used so that Disa could be queen regent and take control of the town. Um, though it gets a little funny. I don't know if you guys did Sven's side quests, and I don't know how much this stuff pops up in the post game with Sven. Did you guys do his side
Y-
quests and kind
Yeah.
of become familiar with him?
I
Okay.
did.
Yeah.
I think I did pretty much everything in Vermont, Vermoon, whatever.
Vermund,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, like Disa is using the guy, but she's motivated by power. But at the same time, Disa is being used by another character. So ultimately, because he, as you get towards the end, has much grander goals in mind.
Yeah. Well, I took the reason I bring up Sven is because in the end, when you are saving all the different towns in the unmoored world, uh it kind of comes across to me that Disa wanted to be queen regent and have control of Vermund so that eventually Sven could lead the town, and because she seems to view him as like a worthy and benevolent leader, and she
Hmm.
almost seemed to want to have that control of Vermund so that her son could inherit it and become the great leader that she imagines he one day will be, which is almost a little in contrast with her character because she's kind of a dick in a lot of
Well,
ways.
yeah, she just cares about wealth, so it kind of makes sense that she would do anything to make sure that
Right,
her yeah.
but like how different is Sven from that, right? Like
Oh yeah.
he's a good ass dude. You buy him an ornate, like fancy box from a merchant, and he starts giving you gifts like every day. He just wants to talk to you by a fountain.
Yeah.
Uh, what a kind kid. Um, but yeah, it just like an observation that from the end game that just seemed interesting to me was this kind of change in perception surrounding Disa. Uh, but anyway, with this false sovereign, yeah, that's like the focus of the first half of the game, and then the second half very much shifts when we start learning more about Lord Phasis how he has developed and created this god sway that is just a magic trinket that lets someone have the Arisen's powers to control pawns and oppose the dragon, I guess.
Hmm.
And we kind of find out to summon a dragon, um, though it's very clearly a different kind of dragon, right? It was the one with all the boils on it.
The fucked up dragon, yeah.
Yeah, which I don't know. How did you guys interpret that? Like summoning this other dragon that it was almost like I don't know if it was intended to be like a false dragon or if it was intended to be like a um kind of like how the false sovereign is, right? It's a counterfeit. It pales in comparison to the real article because it isn't the real article. It's artificial.
Yeah,
Did you guys take it that way?
that seems like the point, because then immediately after he summons it, an actual dragon comes down and kills it, and it dwarfs it in comparison in size. So yeah, and that's what I
Yeah.
meant earlier when I said like Disa was being used as what she was being used by how is it
Theseus, yeah.
Faces.
Theseus. Yeah.
Oh, there's lots of very I guess weird European names. Not weird, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's weird.
There's there's like some Greek stuff, some Eastern European stuff, some Western. There's not really
Yeah.
like a continuity.
Like a clear inspiration behind this world,
Yeah, usually well, when it comes to names, usually writers, like a rule of thumb is like choose a linguistic area and try to keep all the characters consistent outside
Yeah,
of
like
like different regions.
yeah, like how everyone in Dragon Ball is named after vegetables. Another piece
Oh, that yeah,
bits of
good point.
vegetation. Or other items items of food, I guess. Um but anyway, yeah. Yeah, this plot is just it's very uneven, right? Because we the whole first half is opposing this false sovereign, and then the second half becomes this very damp but somehow dire race to stop Faces from having control of a I don't know. The end, the last few missions seem to have this sense of urgency that the rest of the game just didn't have, or the rest
Yeah.
of the game's plot didn't have. And it got to a point where, and I can't even blame the side quests for this. It got to a point where I didn't even really know what what the plot was, like what I was supposed to be doing, what the end goal was.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
agree. And I also didn't understand Facius's intentions until the true ending section, right? Where he actually explains that he's just like acquiring all this knowledge about the Arisen and the dragon, and he even knew about the what's that ethereal dude thing
Rothaniel.
called?
The oh my god, it's in my notes. The Pathfinder.
The Pathfinder, yeah.
Pathfinder.
Thank you. Which is like it's cool that he was able to know all of that, but you didn't know that. You thought he was just a bad guy that was using this power for bad reasons until the true ending, which most people probably won't do because maybe they don't know unless they look it up.
Well, that's another thing, is that a lot of this game can be very, very vague at times in terms of y- conditions and stuff, like,
Very.
and it's really uneven in that too. And we'll get to that when we talk about maybe some design stuff later. But yeah, it seems to be that unless you're an Arisen, you're not privy to the Pathfinder and or the cycle. And even the cycle isn't necessarily known to the Arisen. That was kind of the whole point of when we meet Rothius, the Mad Sovereign, who's sitting in the Seafloor Shrine. You kind of find out that he was a former Arisen that uh, became aware,
Mm-hmm.
almost self-aware to the deal with this world and its true nature, that he's essentially created to stop the world from ending and also to just perpetuate this cycle uh death and rebirth almost.
Yeah,
Not
he's,
not of the
he's
world, but of the Arisen and the dragon.
yeah, and he's called the Mad King because he started killing everybody in pursuit of trying to kill the Pathfinder. Yeah,
Right, right.
Mhm.
He I guess he was the first to want to try and break the cycle, but he went about it in the wrong way and wound up kind of, I guess, what, lost his humanity. I forget the exact explanation as to how he became um kind of ghastly like that.
Yeah, I
Uh
thought he like gathered all the souls of the old Arisens or something weird, or maybe that was for the blade. It's very vague and confusing.
can't quite remember. There is lots of lore in this game, and a lot of it I don't feel matters all that much or necessarily goes far enough to explain what's happening or tie into what's happening. It's just kind of there to be like, we're gonna explain this thing for you. It doesn't matter, but here's the explanation. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
yeah, that's the story wise at least, because this is obviously a very gameplay centric focused, game.
Yeah,
Um, so the story, I don't think gets as much attention, but part of the problem with having like this quote unquote true ending that you kind of need to know that it's easy enough when you see the blue guy after the normal ending and you talk to him, but in
yeah.
terms of actually entering, like figuring out that you got to use the God's Way knife to stab yourself to get to that place, you kind of I don't see how you would intuit that unless you looked it up or were just playing around. But my main point is that with the real ending, like so much exposition is given on that dragon ride that it's almost like explaining, hey, this is what's actually good. This is what the story actually is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the story doesn't actually begin until you get to the end game.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if I'm not mistaken, unless I'm bugging out, you get the Dragon's Dogma 2 splash screen once you
Yes.
Yeah.
enter that world.
Which is
Whereas
like
before, it's just Dragon's Dogma.
the ultimate, like, the ultimate like Kino moment. I fucking love when game like Nier Automata does that. Like, not like it changes the title of the game or anything as it appears on the title screen, but like decides in the latter half, like when shit's going down and you're already 30 hours into the game, to have a whole new opening credits with the title screen.
Yeah.
That shit is amazing, and I did really like when this game decided to do that.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point of comparison though to what I was just saying, because at least those first 30 hours of Nier Automata, there is continuity in the story and thematic elements that
Mm.
continue throughout. Whereas the first, like until you get to the end game and the unmoored world with the true ending and all the quests that come right before that, um, the rest of the game is kind of like bog standard fantasy stuff that isn't really explained. It's really just like there to allow you to play the game and engage in the gameplay loop until you get to that point at which you ride the dragon to the unmoored world. And meanwhile, the Pathfinder tells you all this stuff about the cycle and whatnot that you were not previously privy to.
Well, it's a really like meta thing to do because, again, none of us have played the first Dragon's Dogma, but from what I've read of people that have, this game's story, at least the very bare bones of it, you being an Arisen, opposing a dragon, trying to reclaim your heart, and even the ending decision that you have prior to the true ending, where you either give up your beloved or you fight the dragon. That's all basically in the original Dragon's Dogma. That is the very bare bones um narrative, right? So it's kind of a really meta contextual thing to do, to just call this game for the first however many hours you spend on it Dragon's Dogma, and then you get to the part that's different, where you oppose that fate, where you oppose the perpetuation of this cycle, and that's when it decides, no, this is Dragon's Dogma 2, guys.
Yeah.
This is where the really really new shit begins. Which I think is really a shame, in that it comes at the very end, and in the unmoored world you don't have to spend a ton of time there.
Well, you can't. It's time. There's a time limit.
Well, if you do all the trials, you remove the time limit.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
Which
mean,
is
I
something
did
that
that.
But you do have a limited amount of time to do the trials.
yes.
You're
I
talking about the light calling down the bosses from the light, right?
Yeah.
the red, yeah, the red lights that show up on your map, there's 4 of them, and if you
Oh,
finish all of those, the time limit's
yeah.
removed.
No, I did them all, but it's still called. That's weird. Oh,
Hmm.
you know what? It might be. We'll get to it later. Oh.
Okay. Um, but yeah, like so you initially don't have a ton of time to spend there, but if you do all those all those red beacon like glowy things on your map, that removes the time limit. There's no longer a threat of the world ending, and you can take your time and do whatever you want. Which is really cool, except there's not a ton for you to do at that point.
You've already, if you haven't done a lot of side quests earlier in the game, you're locked out of them. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't even know what's still available at that point other than the side quests that you get there for going around to the towns and evacuating everybody. And
I think it's more meant as like as an end game zone because there's so many more enemies, particularly the larger ones, and you fight lots of them at once, depending on where you
yeah,
are.
and but my problem with that is you spend all this time doing these quests to evacuate people, and you wind up building this like central camp where everyone is there. Every blacksmith from every single town is in that one area at the seafloor shrine. You kind of almost build this community uniting everybody, and then what do you do with it? You end the game. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all there really is.
It's so funny that you say that because I remember when we got to the seafloor shrine, I think it was Brent had another side quest pop up and I was like, nah, bro, I'm done. And I just like ended the game. I was like, I don't even know where they were going with that, but it just I don't know.
Where he asked you to escort you somewhere, and it's like, fuck, I'm
Yeah.
not
I'm
doing
like, are
another
you
escort
kidding me,
mission.
dude?
Yeah,
Like I
yeah.
had enough
Oh,
with escorting in this
that
game
was
at this point.
I imagine that was probably just like an emergent one, right? Because there you get a lot of those where like a companion of yours will show up and there'll be like a yellow thing on your mini map and they'll just be like, hey, I wanted to ask you something, and then some text will appear on screen. They're like, so what do you think? And then you have to escort them somewhere
No,
and then you take them
Yeah.
there.
I don't think it's immersion. I think it's a few of the main characters because like the old guy with the boat. I did the escort mission for him because I thought it was part of. I thought that was how you got that community Harv. I think it is to go to
Yeah.
there,
I
but
don't
it
think
wasn't.
I don't think there's like a primary or like a side quest other than just like a random escort one. I have a feeling that was emergent.
The
Well, I got
emergent
one.
ones are the ones that have like the yellow circle or square on the character that you have to
Yeah.
follow.
Yeah. It's like a little, yeah. And that it's just them talk, they just ask you to take them somewhere. You take them there and they're like, "Thanks, here's your reward."
Well, he
And
asked me to
then
take him to the seafloor shrine, which is why I thought it was scripted.
oh, no. That sounds like it was emergent because I definitely didn't do that and I did every side quest in this game.
Okay.
Um
Yeah.
which was a bit exhausting,
Ugh.
but I did it.
And just to add, because you said you weren't sure if you could do more after you did the trials and things opened up where weren't time limited in the unmoored world. I actually had side quests that I didn't do in like the Elven land that I didn't even know existed until I was in that
Yeah, I
world.
was in the same boat with you on
Yeah,
that one.
I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like, oh, now I gotta like find someone that speaks like Elvish because I didn't do their side quest, but their side quests did pop up once I met them and I found a pawn that spoke their language.
But was that the
You
side quest to evacuate them?
No, no,
Oh,
it
okay.
was the side quest to learn their language so that you don't need a pawn.
well for
Like
them,
basically to build a relationship with them.
they gave me
Oh.
something about saving the arbor tree, and you got
Yeah,
to
well
find a dwarf in Batal, but I don't think he's there anymore.
that's one of the side quests related to the elves, for sure.
And I
Um
think you need to do it in order for the dwarf to be there for you to trigger the side quest to save them.
you don't have to. There's a way I was reading there is a way around that, but it is easier if you have done the Ailing Arborheart side quest. The thing that you bring up, Delilah, about learning the language is interesting because I never that I have to imagine that was like an emergent one too. But I was kind of wondering how you would get that.
It might just
Um,
be pawns that are from another player who has already done that.
well, yeah, because I had to or I wound up hiring a pawn, once I finally decided to take a break from using Blythe and Ophelia for a little
Thank
bit.
you.
Yeah, by the way, for the majority of the game, I used both of your pawns.
Well,
Just
they're free if
I
they're your
know.
friends, right? Like
I
no
don't.
matter what level
Oh,
they are.
is that why they were free?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes
Like
Oh, you
that,
were
you could
that
taking
makes
play
it.
with
sense.
like a level 80 pawn for 0 RC as long as they're your friends.
Interesting. I didn't realize that's why yours were free all the time.
Yeah, she was all decked out, and you were taking advantage of her. She was all decked out in dragon, whatever, the worm
Dude,
crystal
it
armor,
was
and
it was really funny. I thought when I hired at one point Jason's pawn, I had her, she was helping me, whatever. She's wearing like some mage robe and shit. I was like, okay. And then at some point I either had to dismiss her briefly for some reason or she died and I lost her for a bit. And when I went to summon her again, all of a sudden she's wearing like what I could only describe at the time as like BDSM gear.
oh, the
Um
Stargazer robe. Yeah,
yeah, well I had
it's
no, I
it was
was
Oh,
like,
actually it was better armor for
of
her.
well,
course.
That's
but
why.
I did,
Yeah,
but for my sake, for my context, because I was still pretty early in the game in comparison to you guys. I was like, wow, did Jason just like find the sexiest piece of gear and put it on his pawn? Jesus Christ. And then eventually I got that gear and I'm like, oh no, this is actually like really, really amazing mage gear.
Yeah.
Holy crap, this thing is
yep.
helpful. But
Uh
it was really funny because she was in like a robe, and then the next time I see her, she's wearing like this very skimpy outfit. And my fiance happened to see it. She's like, "What are you playing? What is this
yeah.
character wearing?" I'm like, "Oh, that's Jason's pawn." I'm not sure yet if he decided to put that on her just because it was hot,
That's
or
I
if
funny.
it
love
was
that.
because it's actually good gear.
And
And
notice right there, and this conversation right here kind of sums up this game in a nutshell. It's all about the gameplay, the immersion stuff, the little twists. It's about the story you make. Like we're talking about the
yeah,
story and the lore, but notice how much more interesting just
Oh, it's
the
I was
story
just
you
gonna
make
say
out of the
that, Jason.
game.
Like, I
Yeah,
know Mark's trying to make a point right now, but I just have to say, like, this is the most exciting part for me is the pawn system. And just to
yeah.
add to talking about that outfit, I just have to say that I wound up summoning someone. It was a male presenting Beastrin that had that outfit on, and I was just like, oh my God, this is hysterical.
for me, the most memorable part of this game had nothing to do with any of the story moments. It was this pawn. It was the first time I had to leave a dead pawn behind because we were all diminished health. We had to get to Batal, and it was so hard to leave him behind. But there was like three giant enemies that we were under leveled to fight. They were chasing us up the road, and I was looking back at them. It was like Wilson and Castaway. I was like, I was like, I'm sorry, man. I gotta leave you. I can't do nothing about it. My other two pawns, I can't heal them anymore. I gotta get into
That's
the
the
city. I'm
best.
sorry, man.
That's so sad.
I know, and it was more memorable than any story moment, which is both like it's the way I feel about this game in general. It's simultaneously a condemnation yet a major praise for it. Is how well
Yeah.
it does at the other stuff. Yeah,
Which is why, like, I think the true ending, although it wasn't anything grand, it was the better of the three endings. Because it's like your pawn having free will, the pawn that
yes,
you travel with having free will, and then still choosing to help you. I was like, aw, yeah, that's cute.
Yeah. I guess let's actually finish breaking down the ending.
Yeah, sorry.
yeah,
No, so like yeah, as Jason was alluding to, the way to get the true ending, which is pretty vague. Um, I guess the way you could potentially intuit how to get it yourself is you've had to have fought a dragon before going into the ending of the game because you need worms life crystals in order to even proceed with restoring the Godsbane blade. Um, so you know that for a dragon's weak point is its heart,
yeah.
and you have this blade that you've built that has the sway over the pawns. It has like the power of the Arisen like kind of built into it. So I guess the way to intuit that how to access the true ending is during that dragon ride, which if we haven't broken it down yet, the primary just like bog standard ending is yeah, you kill the dragon, become sovereign of Vermund, and everyone applauds you, and I think that's it. Like
You
that's
sit
all
on
there
the
really is.
Elden throne.
But yeah.
But then during the
um
credits, you get control back, and you can see that amongst all the people is the Pathfinder dude, the
yeah, he's basically
luminescent
like,
guy. Yeah.
but do you want to oppose your fate? Do you want to see how things could be a little different? And he takes you back in time. Um, so yeah, the way you could maybe into it, the end, the true ending is you're on this dragon, you have control, and you have this blade with the Arisen's power. And so you crawl around to the dragon's heart, which you know is its weak point. Now, why you wind up stabbing yourself with the blade versus at the end of the true ending stabbing the dragon's heart with the blade, I'm not really sure of the lore or logistical reasons behind that. That's not really something that I feel like I quite understand. Um, I mean, we know that the Arisen's heart is not there, right? Because the
Mm.
dragon consumed it. So stabbing himself in his empty chest, or herself, themself in their empty chest, in order to destroy the dragon and kind of lead the world into oblivion. Um, I'm not really sure why that does that.
Yeah.
Why I guess it's two different ways of breaking the cycle, right? Because either way, stabbing yourself and leading to oblivion, or stabbing the dragon and leading to prosperity, either way is breaking the cycle, because you either the whole point of the cycle was to prevent oblivion from happening, and then so breaking the cycle leads the world to oblivion, and then doing everything that you do reverses it all. You stab the dragon instead, and that doesn't just end the cycle, but it prevents oblivion from happening. I'm just not sure why one leads to one and the other leads to the other. Did you guys feel like that was cleared up at all? Do you have any more insight than I do?
From my understanding, because there's an ending where you could literally, you see the dragon, you could be like, nope, and walk away, and then the game ends like that, and you don't even fight the dragon. So then you would be an Arisen that lost to the dragon, which the
Yeah.
point. And there were a few Arisens that you can encounter in the world, previous Arisens that lost to dragons, like the drunk guy in one of the places. I think it was
Um,
Volcanic Island or something like
yeah,
that.
and I can't
By the
remember
hot
his
spring.
name. Lamon,
Yeah.
Lamon.
Lamon, yeah,
He's
yeah.
the one that gives you warfare.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, so there's Arisens that lost, so that would be like one ending. I interpreted the one where you kill the dragon as the cycle still continues. You just end oblivion for the world as it is, but eventually another dragon and another Risen is gonna come up. Whereas the true ending, you're breaking that entire cycle completely, where there's no new Arisens, there's no new dragons. It's just that ends.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I could be wrong.
I'm more so just wondering, like, why. What I'm getting at is why the Arisen stabbing themselves with the God's Bane blade leads to oblivion, whereas the Arisen stabbing the dragon with the God's Bane blade leads to, or prevents oblivion from happening and prevents dragons or Arisen from existing. I guess that's the disconnect, the difference between the two that I'm not really quite sure about.
It's
But
a
it may-
magic knife you got from a dude, and it's fine.
That's how the writers decided it, and that's how it is. The end.
Just accept it.
Yeah, I'm sure maybe if a lore expert decides to listen to this terrible podcast, they'll be like, well, actually, in the comments, and give that explanation, which, I welcome. Please, like, explain that, because I'd be curious to know. It's just, I do find the dichotomy of the two interesting. I would just like to know why one leads to one and the other leads to the other at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I think doesn't it have something to do with the will? Like, he talks about the will and how, because at one point the Pathfinder says to you while you're on the dragon is actually the protector of the world and the will as they want it to
Well,
happen.
yeah,
So like, there's the will is part of you. It's like a force that's dichotomized between you and the dragon. So by
yeah.
stabbing you, you by proxy magically stab the will and disrupt the will's intentions for the world.
Okay, maybe that's it.
That's just a guess. I
That
don't
could
know.
be that could be the explanation. Because yeah, that's the whole point of the Great Will. The Great Will is who created this cycle to prevent the world from entering oblivion. Because by the drag, yeah, the Pathfinder flat out tells you that the dragon was created to prevent the world from ending, and the Arisen was created to
And I'm pretty sure he says something about the dragon imparting the will upon the Arisen or something like that.
yeah,
By creating them.
something along those lines. It's a little like just word soup and explanations for explanation's sake that kind of it almost just makes you spin in circles, kind of like a cycle. Um,
Wow.
but it's yeah, it's kind of interesting to a fault and kind of confusing at the same time, obviously, and almost just seems like it becomes overly complicated just for the sake of trying to explain itself. Um,
Yeah, and you normally I'm okay with that style of storytelling if I'm invested in the lore and the world and the story, and I just don't think I was here to even care to go
mhm.
down that rabbit hole like I would be in like an Elden Ring. Um, so maybe
Ins-
that's why it
insert
didn't. Yeah.
insert from software game for Delaila here. Yeah.
Right. Like you spend all that time trying to kill Melania, and when you finally do, you want to know who the fuck that bitch was. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
I have a feel. I mean, if I'm remembering Elden Ring correctly, I feel like you know who she is by the time you get to her boss fight. But
Because yeah, she tells you every time she kills you.
something, yeah. But anyway, that probably will not be the last time we compare this to Elden Ring in this episode. So I guess be ready for that.
Yeah.
Not all bad ways. Some good ways. We'll get to that later. But um, so the Unmoored World. Again, yeah, going back to what we were saying, I really I think that this game would have been taken better, at least by me, in terms of the narrative and the structure and the design. If the Unmoored World was entered halfway through versus at the very end,
Oh yeah.
and like say that halfway through the game you can get a premature ending, right? Like you actually only get halfway through the game when the credits roll if you decide to make some choice, right? It's kind of like how Persona games, in particular I'm thinking of Persona 5, how like you make one choice and it could lead to an early end, but if you make the other choice, the correct choice, you suddenly unlock another 20 hours of game because you made the choice that continues the story. Where this kind of has that, but instead of unlocking the next 20 hours of game, you unlock just the next 2 or 3.
Or if they just changed it up and structured it similar to like some Zelda games have done with Ocarina of Time or Link to the Past. Yeah.
Yeah, just like ultimately, I just feel like we needed more time in that unmoored world to really make that moment of Dragon's Dogma 2 showing up on screen and just being in this apocalyptic state, just to make it a little more worthwhile and have more plot happen there than what happens there.
Yeah, I agree. I also felt like the Unmore world, the way the gameplay was structured, minus the escort missions, just going like from boss to boss, and you have just so many bigger enemies in the world was a lot funner to me than exploring the world before that. And I kind of wish more of the game was like that.
Yeah, it feels like they definitely intended it for multiple playthroughs, especially considering how much kind of gets cut off to you if you didn't do it beforehand.
Yeah, the
Um,
the amount of missable content in this game is vast and varied.
which again would have been like I literally just thought of this because I was thinking of Ocarina of Time. Like if you were able to go back and forth between the unmoored world, I don't know how you would make it make sense story wise, but if
Hmm.
you were able to go back and forth between the two worlds, so like you could do side quests you miss, and then it changes the unmoored world. But again, it's just a platform for the gameplay to experience.
Yeah. And for the record, Delilah, I agree that I had the stakes were raised, right? Traveling through the unmoored world, and there was one point where I got bombarded with, I think, a cyclops, a minotaur, and a dragon all back to back
Hell
with
yeah.
no breaks. And it was stressful, because they were a lot more aggressive than a lot of ones that I encountered earlier in the game, except for like the dragon. I feel like the dragons are pretty much at the same
Mhm.
aggression level throughout. Um, but like this minotaur was fucking wild. This cyclops was clobbering my ass, and
Yeah.
it was just a lot. It was a lot more than I expected. Which
Yeah.
was really cool. It was really, really cool, and I was getting rewards left and right, which was really satisfying. I actually had a
Oh, you
lot of
get
fun,
everything. You get way more resources in every aspect in that part of the game. Yeah.
and it was great, like, walking around the, like, where the water once was, and now it's all the water's been, like, it was risen to the heavens or whatever they
Yeah.
say. Um, I was finding chests along the seafloor, and, like, all of them, like, they were giving me, like, tons of fairy stones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um this might be like a point of criticism, but like the fact that you get to the unmoored world and suddenly a lot of the towns decide, oh, now we're gonna have static port crystals. You don't need to use your temporary ones anymore. It's like, oh, thanks. now
Yeah.
now I can teleport to all these places that I had to place a thing at for free.
Yeah, it's I don't like the whole port crystal thing at all.
I didn't mind it. But just think that they needed to give you more of them earlier on, if that
Yes.
makes sense. Like the
And not
fact
have
that
them weigh like more than armor.
I mean, I didn't even pay attention to that, but I feel like I just ignored the weight of most things. I just like dumped stuff on your guys' pawns to make space or to
Thanks.
lessen the weight. You're welcome. Hey, you guys were more helpful than just being my pack mules, okay? Like you guys were actually real. That's why I kept you guys around. Besides the fact that you're my buds. You kind of balanced out my team pretty well. Even when Blythe became a thief, I was like, "Oh, cool. That means I don't have to touch this vocation anymore."
Yeah.
Um, it was helpful. It was really, really helpful.
Well, I mean, I do have a criticism for the port crystal system specifically, but I'll wait till we talk more about gameplay and
Yeah.
combat.
Yeah,
I
just
mean,
getting back to the story real quick because you mentioned just to your idea of having it be halfway through you go to it. The other thing about the unmoored world is you talked about narrative urgency earlier, how there really is none until you get there.
yeah,
Because when you get to the unmoored world, there's like a clear plot object. It's like we got to get everybody to the safe zone because the world's fucking ending. Clouds are coming in. They're all gonna die.
yeah.
So if you would introduce that urgency much earlier in the game, then you might you know be a little bit more the story, assuming all the story elements remain what they are. It might not be the best thing in the world, but at least you have that sense of narrative drive. All right, I know what I got to do. I got to get all these people from around the world to this one spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the fact that it's not even like you need that like dire emergency, like the world is gonna end, you have to save all these people. It's more so just the for the most of the narrative of the game, like you get to Vermund and I kind of like how this is structured. You get to Vermund and Brant tells you about a bunch of rumors and you can kind of tackle any of those quests in any order. And that's really novel and cool, but it's just the fact that after that you go to the convocation, you're barely there because your pawn has a headache and you have to walk away because you kind of find out about the Godsway at that
Yeah,
point. And
that's really where it falls apart. I agree with you. Is that the main story is actually kind of interesting with all the intrigue and the way the missions are structured in Vermund. I think that's why I ended up actually doing everything in Vermund
Hmm.
because there was that drive. But once you get to Batal or past the convocation and you go to Batal, I feel like I was barely really engaging with much. There wasn't as much to engage with. It wasn't as interesting.
yeah, well, the narrative takes just a big shift once you find out about the Godsway. It's
Yeah,
no longer about that false sovereign. It's now and well, I guess in a way it is, but less about the sovereign himself and more about what his tool is and where it came from.
Right.
So that's really where that shift happens, but it still removes any sense. It takes a big enough shift and removes any sense of urgency, or doesn't have at any point any sense of urgency. The intrigue just shifts gears and in a way becomes um a little expedited, yet a
yeah.
little just you know different and kind of less interesting.
Because you spend
Um
time in Vermund finding the disguises so that you can. Because you have to. Well, you don't have to, but like the way optimally. Well, for some of them you have to, but getting the noble disguise, getting the armor for the guards, so you can go around the castle. I found that shit to be awesome.
Oh,
It's almost
for
like
the
Hitman, like.
yeah,
Yeah.
but for the record, you don't need to equip that stuff. You can just walk around the castle
Oh,
freely.
no, 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 I know, but, like,
Okay.
you well, with the guard stuff, no, if you're
The
sneaking in the
prison, you
back.
had to wear the guard
Yeah, the
stuff.
prison, yeah.
Are you sure? Because
Yes,
I
you will get
didn't.
attacked by the guards, yeah.
Oh, I like walking into the castle. I picked that stuff up, equipped it, and then I read later. Yeah, you don't have to wear it. Like you could just walk around like looking like a schlub. I didn't know about the jail having to equip it.
With the
Yeah, like when you
castle yeah, with the jail, the guards will attack you automatically, but with the castle, I think certain areas, the guards will attack you if you're not
I
in the
don't
armor.
think so because I ran around that castle in my normal clothes and no one cared.
Well, don't break my fantasy. I was having fun thinking that, "Oh, this is like
Well,
Hitman, I gotta put
I guess
on, like, a
my
costume."
my point, though, the reason I bring this up is because it's not to break your fantasy, Jason, but I wish there was more stuff like that, right?
That's
Like
no, that
having
I agree with you because like Vermund is very much like that, where you got to prepare for the missions and kind of figure out how to navigate it.
yeah,
Whereas the rest of the main missions, it's kind of like go to spot, thing happens, go to spot, thing happens.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like a perfect example of just like how cool how cool the potential of this game systems could be is like the masquerade. You have
Hmm.
to wear the courtly outfit and a mask to be allowed into the masquerade.
And you got to
And
find the secret door, which it doesn't like explicitly tell you. You kind of gotta
Yeah.
have to intuit from the little cutscene. Yeah.
and the fact that yeah, you have to use observational skills, right? It's clearly outlined as like a door. And so you have to kind of pay attention to your surroundings and realize that hey, something's off here. Kind of like
Or
finding a wall that you can see for in Metal Gear Solid.
I discovered it because someone actually walked through it, and I was like, "Oh,
Oh, okay.
yeah."
Somebody just like glitched through the wall. Yeah.
Like they just
No, it was actually like a NPC that was just walking around that walked
like
through the door.
they went to lean on the wall and realized, ah, this is a door. Whoops. But yeah, shit like that was really really cool. Having to change what you're wearing in order to blend in, like I wish that was more permeated through the entire experience. But it really wasn't. And in general, I spent a lot more time in Vermont than I did in Batal because there was a lot more interesting stuff there.
Same.
Whereas,
Yeah.
and that's even just with the main story. Again, I really liked the fact that Brant just gives you a list of tasks to look into, and you can tackle them in any order. And they're all playing into this kind of political intrigue and mystery as to why is there a person that's pretending to be the sovereign or the Arisen.
Yeah.
Um,
And then
that
the
stuff's
answer
really
is just not
interesting.
super satisfying. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it leads to you going to the Southern Land just for a handful of quests to chase after this magical doohickey.
Yeah, like there's
It's
this Empress Nadia who you barely interact with at
uh
all.
what's her I think it's Nadina.
That
Nadina
sounds right.
Nadia.
Nadina, yeah.
It's
Um,
Nadia something. I don't know. The only real quest you have with her is it's actually kind of cool in the mechanic in that although it's really simple and easy, but the one where you got to pick out who the assassin is.
there's
Yeah.
Yeah,
there are more side quests to that quest line. Like there's you kind of go down the conspiracy of trying to find out who is the person that was giving the assassination order, and you find out I think it was one of her handmaidens or something along those lines. I kind
Yeah.
of don't quite remember, but there was more to that quest line, and you do get other side quests involving her to kind of build that relationship. Um, Speaking of relationships, did you guys do Ulrika's or Wilhelmina's side quest lines and kind of get their whole
yeah.
romance thing going?
So I had heard that there was some kind of romance system. So of course I'm gonna choose Wilhelmina with the brothel,
Yeah,
right? Except
right. Because
I
you just
I
love supporting sex workers, right, Jason?
but I wasn't looking up like what precisely I was supposed to do. So I just assumed that I was supposed to basically just like keep going there and sleeping there, which costs a lot of money at that point of the game.
Yeah.
And then in order to buy the tickets to get the better hose, it costs more than a house, I think, in the game to get
Um,
just the first upgrade. So eventually, I was like, I can't. I don't have the money because gear is actually important in this game, and gear is expensive too at that point.
yeah, yeah, it is.
So I was like, I'm sorry, but But sleeping with Wilhelmina is just not worth this. It's too
Yeah,
pricey.
but did you find out how to actually romance her?
No,
Oh, you just do her side quest.
I didn't even know. I kept going back there and talking to her, and I never got a side quest.
I think
So
in order to trigger it, you can also give gifts to people, which is like one of those mechanics that only matters, I feel, well, I guess you can do it and wind up like occasionally they'll wind up giving you gifts and stuff at your house if you have a house. Which is nice. You just get like some random apples and leaves and stuff left at your home in a bag outside the front door, which is
Yeah,
very
that all rotted by the time I got to the unmoored world. I'm so pissed. I had like 50 apples that were just rotten.
I was pissed when I wasn't looking. I was in the middle of the fight, and rotten stuff will still heal you, but it will
Yeah.
give you a debuff.
Debilitation, yeah.
Yeah, and I wasn't reading. I didn't know it was rotten. I just saw it was giving me health, so I was eating rotten shit and debuffing myself through the fight. Yeah,
But point being is like I think you just have to for Wilhelmina, I think you just have to give her some gifts to raise her affection with you a little bit, and then at some point you'll go to her and she'll give you her side quest, which is a really cool side quest. It involves her. Did either of you do this then? I
I
guess only.
didn't know
no,
you could romance anyone in this game.
Oh, okay. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it's well, again, it's not really so much a romance as it is you do their side quest, and it's only Ulrika or Wilhelmina.
Wilhelmina. Yeah,
But you do their side quest, and then you get a little scene of them doing a little smooch at the end, or a little something something at the end, and that's it.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
But
well, Wilhelmina kissed me, but to like cover up for me.
yeah,
But
Yeah,
that
that's
it
a
was
wasn't.
cutscene.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's just part of like a main quest. There's a
Oh.
side quest with Wilhelmina that was actually really excellent.
yeah.
Um,
I'm really sad I missed out on that because in all of the missions for the main story, that was kind of one of the high points was that whole thing where she kind of like after the masquerade, she covers for you and takes you through, and there's a whole thing in the courtyard where she covers for you again. Like she definitely had way more character, it seems to me, in with regards to the main story, and way better dialogue than the other option.
Yeah, so I guess to let you guys know what happens in that side quest, because I doubt you're ever gonna replay the game to see it yourselves. um, Wilhelmina wants you to help her assassinate Allard, the Regent Queen's
Oh,
right hand man. You find out in the conclusion of the side quest that he murdered her parents, and
Oh.
she's carried this grudge with her basically her whole life. And you find out that one of her parents was a Beastren. She's half Beastren,
Oh,
and
that's cool.
the reason her hair is covering one of her eyes is because it's a Beastren eye. It's
Sick.
a really cool
Wait.
reveal.
see,
So like when she's in bed with you, does she just like slowly reveal her Bishun eye?
No, she reveals that when she's murdering Allard.
Oh, okay.
like yeah, because that was like her big reveal to him. Like, yeah, you murdered my parents, you fucker.
see,
Um,
that's why I'm of two minds on this game because, like, on one hand, it's kind of cool that you have to explore the mechanics and find the gift giving and give it to her to up the relationship or whatever. On the other hand, that's a really cool storyline that probably should have just become naturally available to you at one point.
yeah, just
Yeah.
a lot of these things. Like, I really kind of question if you only do the main story, like from beginning to end, if you ignore all the side quests, what is the end of the game like? Because I spent all this time doing these side quests with Sven, with Wilhelmina, with Ulrika.
There's the nurses in like the slums that are like fucking with people.
Yeah,
You gotta like
yeah.
stalk the lady, and that's how I found out about oracles. I didn't even know oracles were a thing, but that quest when you're stalking her in the night to see what she's up to, you pass by
Hmm.
an oracle.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Baron who's just like in this random camp out in the northern section of Vernworth or
Hmm.
Vermund. Like if you don't do these side quests like and develop these relationships, like all these characters showed up in my ending cutscene. And I'm like,
So it's like, who the fuck
these
are
are
these
all
people? Yeah.
well, I mean, it's all side quest stuff for the most part. So I'm like, if you don't do the side quests and you don't build these relationships, does this entire scene change? And these people don't show up? Because without doing those side quests, you don't really have context for most of these folks.
Right.
Like Brocker and his I can't remember his assistant's name. Or the elves. You guys didn't do any of the elven stuff
No,
or
yeah.
even realize that it existed. So like, what's his name? I can't remember I remember the girl's name, Doreen or Doreen or something along those lines. Because I thought she was going to become a romance option with how much time I was spending with her in side quests, and she never did. Um, and her brother's the one that like kind of introduces you to the Elven lands, and I can't remember his name. Mostly because it's very Elven. And I looking at it, I didn't really know how to pronounce it.
See, that's
Um,
another cool gameplay thing. I love how it relies on your knowledge of the menus beforehand, because when you don't know Elven, it's all in Elven. So you go
yeah.
to a store and you got to just know which one is by side.
Yeah.
Which I thought was so clever. I was like
Yeah.
upgrading stuff in the first of all, I also didn't realize there were different styles to upgrading until I was in Batal
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
realized, oh, they have a completely different upgrade style to Vernworth. And then I realized that the elves have their own upgrade style, and that I had upgraded magic weapons and items with other styles, and I could have done it in the elven style and it would have been much more beneficial, which was like, ah,
Mm.
that kind of sucks, but wow, that's actually really cool. There's a lot
And
of
again,
systems that
it goes back to a lot of this. I think it feels just like platform for the gameplay and made or intended for replay. Yeah.
yeah, which is frankly, from what I've come to learn about Dragon's Dogma 1, like yes, it is very much a game intended to replay in New Game Plus so that you can either do things that you missed, but mostly like experience new systems and see new things. Um and we'll talk a little bit about that closer to the end of the show, but yeah, so many of these side quests seem so crucial to getting the most out of this game's story, and I really, I really almost want to replay just beelining the main story and ignoring everything else just to see how different it is at the end. Because again, if these characters show up, they're completely out of context versus how much time I spent building those relationships, doing their quests, learning about them. And I like it endeared me to a lot of these characters. I really grew to like a lot of them.
And
Um
to use another game as a point of comparison, like a Bethesda game, like or not even well, technically Fallout's not Bethesda didn't create it, but they acquired it.
yeah.
But just thinking of like Fallout games, because it's very much the same way in an Elder Scrolls or Fallout game, where a lot of the times you can just beeline the main story, and but there's so much you miss out on, so much world building, so many. So like in a way, it does feel like a lot of traditional role playing games in that sense, and it might just be we've come accustomed to all of that kind of narrative depth being shoved in your face, where and side quests kind of being afterthoughts or just extensions. So I don't know. Again, I'm of like two minds on it. I like it in some aspects, and I don't, or wish it was different in other aspects.
Yeah, I'm sad that like I missed out on some of the quests that Mark was talking about because they do sound interesting, and I did do some quests that I myself enjoyed, but I did it whatever was on my natural path. I didn't go out of my way to look things up. Um, but at the same time, I like games where you do have to look things up to figure out like to get deeper into the game because
Feels
it's
very old school, yeah.
yeah, it feels old school. It feels more like you're pet paving your own adventure, rather than it telling you where to go.
I think the key difference here is that, like Mark was saying, unlike say a Fallout game where you could just take New Vegas, you could just mainline the main story, go mess with Doctor or do your stuff with Mr. House, whatnot. But at the same time, like there's so much geopolitical, all the factions, you know, the New California Front, Kaiser's Legion, all that stuff that you kind of just miss out on. And you don't really have a context for what your actions in the main quest mean. Whereas here, like Mark said, if you just do the main quest and don't do any of the side quests, you lose a lot in the main quests. Um, Whereas the main quests in those classic games can be self-contained. Like you don't need to know necessarily what's going on with Kaiser's Legion and California, the new whatever it is, the new California front, whatever. I
Yeah, the
forget the
faction
name.
quests had
Yeah,
their own contained story.
and you didn't necessarily need to know that to get what you get out of the main quest. Whereas here, you kind of do, as Mark pointed out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, and I really just wonder, if you don't do, I mean, Jason, I guess you didn't do many of those side quest lines when you went in the unmoored world when you were going around the town saving people. Like, what was that experience like? Like, if you didn't
Well,
build,
some of those areas I didn't even explore beforehand, like the
okay,
volcanic island. I meant like Delilah. I had spent hours trying to get to the area of the map where the elves were. I didn't even know there were elves until you get a port crystal. All of a sudden pops up,
you're
on
like,
the
what the
unmoored
hell is
world.
Sacred Arbor?
Well, I had that entire like black oval area in the northwest. I
Hmm.
was like, there's got to be something here because it's such a large place and it's specifically blacked out. I spent hours early in the game trying to figure out, a way in there. I don't even know how you get to the elves
I don't.
before.
Well, the elves are all the way, like all the way at like the top left of like that area of Vermont. There is like a big circle area in like the middle of the mountain range that, as far as I know, is inaccessible. At least I never saw or could find a way to get to that
Right. And I
area.
was I
But
was trying for hours and eventually I just gave up and, did all the stuff in Vermoon. But like I was kind of angry. I was like, on one hand, it's cool. On the other, I guess there was a way to get there beforehand. It's just I wish it hadn't been so what's the word I'm looking for? So concealed. But then again, it's also cool that it's so concealed because it's fucking elves.
it's funny because like the way I got there, the way I think you naturally get there is when you get to Vermont and start talking to Brant and doing stuff around the city. The way I found it was, again, there's a side quest that begins a whole series of side quests that bring you there, and it's the one elven guy. Now I'm gonna have to look this guy's name up because it's gonna drive me crazy. But he's there and he's contemplating buying a bow, but the whole thing about his name is his Glindwer. Sure, it's Glindwer. I might be pronouncing
Is
that
that the
completely wrong.
Legolas looking guy?
Yeah, that's the Legolas looking guy.
Okay.
But he's just there and he's just looking at the weapon shop and he's like, it it goes against my people's will or my people's beliefs to buy a human made bow, but I'm really interested in them. And he's got his trial of archery coming up and he's really interested in human archery. And the quest is for you to give him a bow, and it could be any bow. You give him one as a gift, and he's like,
Oh
you
shit!
become buds with him,
I
and
think I
he's
had that quest and I just ignored it. Oh shit!
and
Yeah,
he
yeah, yeah.
he takes you not to the Sacred Arbor necessarily, but a training ground nearby to show him the ways of human archery. And then you get another quest that actually brings you to Sacred Arbor for
Yeah,
his exam.
because that
And
requires you to switch your vocation, right?
yeah, you have to be an
That's
archer in order to do it.
I think I just breezed past that because I didn't feel like
Ah.
switching.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's like the only quest I can think of that actually requires you to be a specific vocation. I don't think any others, at least not that I can recall, require you to have a specific one.
I think I
um
assumed it was like a quest line to get the because each vocation has their like special thing that you get through a quest line or some other means. I think I
now
assumed it was for like a special ability for archers, so I was like, okay, I can
Well,
pass
it
this.
it does eventually lead you to get the Maester's teaching for Archer. But yeah, it's overall just a quest line to bring you to the Sacred Arbor and meet the elves, and like the second after you do or after you go with him to the training ground, like you then have to do a quest where you save his sister, and then after you save his sister and finish that quest, then she's the one that gives you the ailing arbor heart, where she wants you to go to Batal and get the whatever the hell it was to save the arbor heart or heal it or whatever. Like that's how you naturally get there. It's all side quests. It's all stuff that you don't need to do, but oh my god, it's so much more interesting. Frankly, it's so much more interesting content than a lot of the main story.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Which I don't think is universal. I mean, it's funny you bring up Elder Scrolls and Fallout. Like, at least Bethesda made Fallout, and a lot of people will tell you, especially with Bethesda made Fallout games, is that the side quests are far better than the main plot.
Well, Obsidian made New Vegas, but
Well, yeah, I know,
yeah.
that's true, but I wouldn't say that what I just said is necessarily true of New Vegas, but it's definitely true of Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. Um, but
And the Elder Scrolls just generally.
yeah,
Like
but with
Skyrim's main story fucking blows.
Yeah.
But
there's a
to
lot
have
of people
something,
that have never even beaten Skyrim story, but
yeah, but
they
all the side content, there are some great side quests in Skyrim, yeah.
yeah. But with this game, there is a lot of great side content, and a lot of it does kind of eclipse the main plot in several ways. But there's also a lot of really bog standard. This guy's lost. Go find him, and you go and you go to the quest marker and you find him and you bring him back, and quest's complete. And that there's a lot of that kind of
Yeah.
garbage side quest content. Um, that's the kind of stuff that's like, all right, trim the fat and just have, instead of, I think there's like 65 side quests, instead of 65 with some being amazing and some being mediocre, just cut the mediocre ones out and just give me the really, really good stuff.
Yeah, even for some of the more interesting side quests, like the one with the twins, where you found out like one was like put in the slums.
Oh my god, yeah.
That
Mhm.
that quest, like it was basically a fetch quest nonstop for like 4 quest cycles before you found out information about the twins. And it's like, damn, like why do you got to make people go through all this shit? It was my same complaint with Final Fantasy 16 side quests. It's like the end result is cool, but the mission, the way you get there is just like go from here to there, here to there. And in Dragon's Dogma, traveling is annoying, like, which is my complaint about this game is I would have enjoyed exploring a lot more if I could fast travel to at least the towns. And that doesn't mean that I don't want to explore in between, but if you're going to make me do a quest that has nothing to do with the world, that just has to do with the people that are in the town, just let me get there as quickly as possible, because when you travel on foot, you're facing a bunch of troll, you're facing a bunch of like orcs or whatever they're called, a bunch of creatures, the freaking lizard dudes. Like, I don't want to fight 100 of these things just to get to like a cool big boss or to get to whatever quest I need to do. Like it just got in the way and there was no way around it really. So that's why I didn't really like exploring it. And I just wish that it didn't have that system so that I could have explored it and experienced these side quests without having to do the fetchy stuff.
See, again, I'm on two minds where I actually really enjoy that aspect of like it's actually like a fantasy adventure. So you gotta if you're got a journey somewhere for a quest, like you like that was my favorite part of the game is just go like, all right, I need to go here. I'm gonna pick my route. I travel there, and I gotta deal with all the stuff that comes in between. I gotta be ready before I go. I gotta make sure when I get there, rest up. I like that stuff. But where I'll agree with you is that because, especially if you're doing side quests, you're going back and forth so much, and you're going over the same kind of routes over and over again, and encountering the same exact enemies in the same exact placements over and over
Yeah,
again. Like that novelty does fade,
right.
especially the later you get into the game. Where like I know going from Vermoon to Harv, I'm gonna go along the coast. I know there are goblins here. There's some lizard dudes here. There's a slime that spawns here. There's a cave with some more lizard dudes. I know the exact route in my mind because I went back and forth through it so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if they had found a way to alleviate that a little bit, I still want to go on those journeys where I'm, walking through the wilderness because it is that gameplay loop with the combat system is the highlight of the game, as we've
Yeah.
alluded to multiple times. Just if there was a way to like alleviate that without completely negating the need to travel on foot or ox cart and get ambushed, what have you.
Again, I love traveling on foot. I just hate why I had to travel on foot. Like it didn't feel like the payout was good. Like the exploration was fun, but I just wish the quests weren't just to go from town to town to provide this item to this person and find this person. I wish they led me to more of the world. Like, oh yeah, walk over here and fight this big boss, or walk over here and see this cool thing, or whatever.
Yeah, I wish like you're saying, the minor quests didn't necessarily require you to do so much of that. Whereas if there was a better way of classifying the quests, specifying like what kind of quests, I don't know. Like for instance, Mark was mentioning this one with the elf that I just passed by because I didn't feel like changing vocation. If there was a way to like mark that this is a particularly special side quest.
Oh, so you want the Final Fantasy 14 approach where they put a little plus sign next to the quest marker?
Yes. No, yes. Exactly. No. But like exactly that like where it's I don't know how I would do it to make it feel natural, but yes, you're getting my point.
I mean, a couple things. I don't know that I actually kind of really appreciated how all quests were marked the same. You didn't know which one was necessarily more important than another. And again, I think that just goes back to the fact that they needed to cut the bloat, get rid of the really, really like dull, banal, like pointless side quests that are just basically go find a guy and bring him back or something, and trim that down to just have the really like reduce it from like 65 with some mediocre ones to like 45 really excellent side quests. And
Yeah.
those are intermixed with the main quests, and you don't know which ones are which because they're all just that important or that interesting to do that there's no differentiation between them. I think that would have been to me that's fine. And I again really appreciated the fact that they weren't marked differently to show to show that one is like a side quest versus a main quest.
Yeah, again, like I said multiple times, I'm of two minds of it. Like I do agree with you that the mystery is integral in making the game feel as like old school as it is, and like everything could be, something huge or something minor. At the same time, to Delilah's point, when you just happen to pick a bunch of meaningless side quests and they require you to travel a bunch in ways that are not, so easy, like via ox cart. Like, why
Yeah.
can't the ox cart stop at a certain point near this village that it passes right by? You know what I mean? Like,
Really, I feel like this game needed some sort of mount system, not where you'd have like a permanent mount. Like say because there's oxes out in the wild. Like say that there's a way for you to tame a wild ox so that you can ride it, but it's not like a permanent mount, right? It's just one that you use temporarily to get from point A to point B, and
yeah,
it's something that you do on the fly.
yeah.
There is like something kind of like that if you're fighting a griffin and the
You
griffin
can,
goes to
you
yeah,
can ride it. Yeah,
which but you don't have control over where it takes you. You go where it takes you, and
Right.
good luck getting off of it safely without it landing. Because you're not doing that safely. But like there needed to be some sort of alternative way for you to get creative and go somewhere that you want to go without needing to rely on your own 2 feet every single time.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing that I do want to say with regards to just going places and getting quests that might be inconvenient, I kept thinking for a lot of this game, Nakey Jakey did a video about Red Dead Redemption 2 years ago,
yes,
really
I
right
know
after
what
that
you're
game
talking
came out.
about.
And he
How
taught
Rockstar's game design is outdated. Yeah,
yes, but the thing that kept running through my mind was how inconsistent a lot of the game systems were. And that's kind of what I had running through my mind playing this game, where exploration is so encouraged. And it's really I liked exploring this game's world way more than I enjoyed exploring Elden Rings. I'll say that out. I'll say that up front. I enjoyed exploring this game's world so much more because it was a little tighter, and at least a cave or a place like a dungeon or something, it would be a little more evident when you'd come across one than a lot of Elden Rings were, and you weren't always going into a cave or a dungeon in this game expecting it to be this long thing that would always end in a boss. It always felt like you might be surprised if there is something at the end of it or if there isn't something at the end of it, which I
I think
thought
for
was
you, there's also the anxiety aspect to
yeah,
Elden Ring. Yeah, yeah.
a little bit. But but I just really enjoyed the whole prospect of like finding a cave and it's literally just you walk in, there's a chest, and then you walk out. Or you find a cave and it's this long labyrinth of tunnels, and you find a chest, there's a lot of different enemies and stuff in it, and you fight them and then you leave. Or you go into a cave and it's a really big ogre and you just have to fight the ogre. And you might find something there that's worthwhile, or you might not find something there that's worthwhile. I really just really enjoyed that exploration aspect of this game. So it is a little disappointing that pretty much every quest just has a big glowing yellow mark on your map explicitly telling you, hey, for this you need to go here. There's not really any discovery for yourself when it comes to questing. You always know where you have to go, and you will basically always know what you have to do next. There's not a ton of figuring things out for yourself when it comes to the quests, which is a shame when the exploration feels as good as it does, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think with the cave system, I could agree because you never knew, like you said, how big or small the cave was going to be, what was in the cave. When the caves did involve basically facing the same enemies I faced in the regular path, I didn't like it.
Yeah, and
But
that
when
comes down to like a lack of enemy variety. A lot of people have been harping on that about the
and
cave.
just that they're just so persistently there. It's almost like an RPG where like in like a cave, every 2 steps you fight a Zubat or something, like in a Pokemon game. Like it was just annoying. Like I didn't want to deal with them. But when I like did just find some treasures, or I did face a giant enemy, it was really good and really fun. And I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how deep I was going to go. Some caves were just literally right there. Oh, you pick up a thing, you fight a thing, and you come back, and that's it. So I do agree that the caves were more creative in terms of exploration. It's just the main path, like the main road is what bothered me
Yeah,
because of the way the enemies were
Yeah,
placed.
goblins galore. Yeah.
Yeah.
really, and
Versus like you take a little side path, you do some exploration. Oh, cool, it's some ruins. Oh my god, fucking 2 giant golems came up. You can't hurt them because the rocks got hit special. Like that shit is awesome.
yeah.
But just like going along the main road and every couple minutes, or not even every couple minutes, every like minute, there's a grouping of goblins. Yeah, I get what you're
I
saying,
would say
Delilah.
even less than that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's all the more frustrating too when you do want to like, and this is mostly from Vernworth to Melv or to Checkpoint Rest Town, when you get on an ox cart and you just you get on the ox cart, you pay, and then you doze off because you don't want to sit there and wait for the ox cart to like go through 10 minutes of animation on the road, so you just doze off. But then you get interrupted by a mob of enemies that attack, and if they do it too close to the ox cart, they might kill the ox, or they might kill, or like
Oh
destroy the
god,
cart,
that
and then
happened to
you're
me. Yeah.
fucked if you're stranded out there in the middle of the wild.
Yeah.
Especially in
Because
Batal, because there are like maybe a third, a fourth of the campsites in that immediate main road area
Mhm.
there are in Vermund. Yeah,
Yeah, so that was really my bigger issue with just like the main road and kind of going from town to town. I actually liked having to use the ox carts as like your main form of transportation. Again, it felt like pretty immersive.
just wish they
Um,
stopped at more places. Like there were stops like
yeah,
at the towns because they do follow roughly along that main road.
yeah, but
Yeah.
the other thing I guess about that is that there's just not that many towns for them to stop at. Like even if it was just like
I guess I'm
here,
mostly talking about Harv because that's the one I was talking about. I know exactly how to walk there because I walked back and forth
yeah.
so many times, and I know exactly where the enemies spawn and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, and there definitely needed to be like some sort of stop at Harv. It would have been nice to have a couple ox cart, like ox carts that like there's a couple camps between the road from Melv to Vernworth. If there's a couple like camps and the ox carts will stop to see if there's any new passengers to pick up, or if you want to stop at one of those stops so that you get off the ox cart somewhere in between those two locations, something that for side quests and or like exploration I did frequently. That would have been a welcome addition.
Yeah.
Um especially when, again, I'm not going to sit there for 10-15 minutes or so for the ox cart to go from one place to the other. I'm going to doze off so that goes by faster. Also, I found it really funny that ox carts don't travel by night, yet almost every time I would doze off, it would get stopped by enemies halfway between a
Yeah.
location, and it would almost always be nighttime.
Yeah.
Um, Again, the inconsistency in a lot of the game systems and world, it's just a little bit jarring, to say the least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess one more quest I do really want to bring up, because this kind of goes against a lot of what I just complained about, at least in terms of direction of what you're supposed to do. Did either of you find the Sphinx and do any of
No.
its riddles?
Nope.
Mm-mm.
Oh God, that was really really cool.
Oh.
There's so it's up by the ancient battleground. There's a secret cave you can kind of find that takes you to a mountain shrine, and at that mountain shrine there's a Sphinx, and the Sphinx gives you a handful of riddles, and you have to solve them, and a lot of them are really interesting. I guess just to spoil a few of them. Well, I mean, one of them is really obvious. You know those seekers tokens that you're picking up
Yeah.
throughout the game? They're like they're hidden little tchotchkes you have to find that give you rewards at the vocation guild. One of the riddles is you have to go back to where you found your first one. So
Wow. How are you
you,
supposed to remember?
you just have to remember.
What the
It's either you know that that's a riddle, so you mark down where that was, or you better have a good memory and go back to that location.
Oh my god. How did you
Um,
remember?
because it happened. I found my first one right before I got to Melv, so I don't know. It was just kind of like a very very lucky memory association that I remembered finding that right across the bridge before Melv, so I knew exactly where to go for that riddle. But yeah, if you found yours, in between quests somewhere random
Or
with
like in a
no
cave
association,
somewhere. Yeah.
yeah, like good luck. Um, but yeah, that was one of the riddles. I thought that was really cool. Another
Wow.
one was trying to pick another good one. The Sphinx wanted you to bring back one of its parents, and the way to solve that is, and this is, I don't know how you would do this without doing what I wound up doing. You have to bring back a pawn that has the name Sphinx in it.
Well,
And
okay. Sorry, I'm just mind blown right now because there was I summoned a pawn named Sphinx Parent,
yeah,
and it was super popular. It had a bunch of hearts and thumbs up. I was like, oh,
and now
maybe
you know
this.
now you know why.
Yeah, I thought it was because she was hot, but apparently there's like lore behind this.
Yeah, you could either, there's Sphinx father, Sphinx mother, or Sphinx parent. You can bring any one of those to the Sphinx to solve that riddle. Um, and like some of these riddles, like they have different solutions, or not different, multiple solutions, I should say. And as long as, what's up?
So the people who created the pawn was Capcom. It wasn't like a
Yeah,
person.
yeah.
Oh, okay,
If you look at the Arisen details, it just says Capcom.
got it.
For those Sphinx ones, and the way I think the most common way to get like a guaranteed spawn for one of them is to turn off network and go to specific rift stones to get them. Um, so
Cool.
yeah, but like it's creative shit like that where you have to figure it out yourself, or use a guide. But like you have to figure it. I was telling Jason the other day, um because you were complaining about carrying the dwarf with the bad back, and I mentioned, oh, just pick him up and use a fairy stone to teleport, and you were like, I didn't think of that. There's a Sphinx riddle where you have to carry a delicate vase to this specific person. You have to find the person, and if you carry that vase from the location to the town where they're at, and you take damage, the vase breaks and you fail the riddle. So the
Wow.
easiest way to solve the riddle is to not bring the vase to the person, but bring the person to the vase,
Right.
and just go and find them and teleport them back. It's shit like that. It's like that was like a really really cool side quest. That had very very good worthwhile rewards. Um,
Yeah, that sounds really cool.
Yeah, I mean, doing that side quest is one of the like 2 gold trophies in the game's trophy list. So,
Ah.
they clearly want you to.
Yeah.
It's rewarding in more ways than one, I'll say.
Yeah,
And-
that reminds me, just speaking of Sphinx Parent, at the ending credits of the true ending,
Oh
it
yeah,
shows you all the pawns that you traveled with. I was like, oh, that's very cute.
yeah.
Yep.
And it showed me, yeah, it shows like your top 3 pawns, um, which was both of yours, and then some random one named Kitty that I probably used early in the game. Um, there was it tells you like your closest companions. So like for me, it was I think Ulrika, Wilhelmina, and some random lady that I gave a lot of gifts to in order to get a specific trophy. Um, and yeah, it was kind of cool how the credits kind of did that. Like, was like,
Yeah,
oh, here's some stats for you now. And
yeah,
they're very specific to you and your journey, your playthrough.
Yeah. I will say just one quick addendum to we were talking about exploration. I
Hmm.
think one negative thing I would bring up is just not the fact that there is a weight system, which I don't mind. It's in a ton of RPGs.
Yeah.
It's how much fucking weight they made like really important items, which kind of acts as a deterrent from keeping you from exploring too far or too long because at least I was picking up literally everything because so much of the materials from things you kill is necessary for upgrades. Like I said before, items are and upgrades are really significant and important in this game. So like you would only go like 5-10 minutes before you're already overweight. You'll have difficulty if there's like a big fight. Your stamina will get fucked up. Even offloading them to your pawns, like you'll still very quickly rack up your weight. Even I don't know how many fucking those gold beetles I ate. My max weight was super high, but like even your camping kit is like a quarter.
Yeah.
Why is your camping kit a quarter of your total weight? Like they could have made stuff like that like not affected. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I don't
Like
know where I got this. I eventually got an elite camping kit, and that one weighed the least and was the most durable. So I basically used that for the rest of the game, and I never lost it.
but I feel
Even
like
I even got raided with it a couple times, and I never lost it. Go ahead.
when it comes to exploring the map really far away from any kind of save point with like a inn or a teleport, the weight system almost disencourages that unless you're just leaving stuff which could be valuable or invaluable later down the line when you want to upgrade something and you just don't know it.
I mean, in some regards, I do kind of like that because it's providing player choice, right? You have to make tough decisions when you're out in the wild. Do I pick up a bunch of these materials and make myself slower and more encumbered, or do I leave them behind so I can keep my mobility and my speed a little higher, and save room for potentially more important things down the line? I did have this problem occasionally, but I feel like I didn't have it as much as you might be describing, or you may have had, just because I was going to back to town a lot
But
for side
if you go
quests and
back to
stuff.
town, there's no way to get back.
Well,
Without, I mean, there is,
you
but
got
like
2
if you got to
legs.
walk, no, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying is you got to do that walk all over again.
Eventually, what I started doing was I would when I had enough port crystals to spare one, I would keep that with me. So
See,
if I
I never did until the Unmoored World. That's the thing.
oh, okay, yeah, and that's like a bit, kind of an issue. I think I just
And
alluded to it earlier,
I
but
set mine up in Batal because there's no port crystal in Batal,
yeah,
so I
which
just left it there immediately. Yeah,
right, and
me too.
that's kind of my, like, the issue I alluded to earlier that I guess I'll reiterate now and expound upon a little bit. The fact that for most of the game there's only 2 static port crystals and they're both pretty close to each other. Why the fuck would you do that? And why wouldn't you give a few more? You get a port crystal for doing that elven side quest line that I was telling you guys about. There's one that you can find randomly in a griffin nest.
Mm.
Um, I think there's one as a Sphinx riddle reward. And yeah, there's just like there a lot of them are just from finding them randomly or doing these random side quests that you don't know what reward you're going to get. and there's not enough static ones for convenience sake. Like, you don't have one in Bakhbatal. You have to set one up, and that it's kind of frustrating. And then the unmoored world decides, fuck it, here you go. There's one in every major place. Go nuts. It's like, why like, even if you had to unlock them somehow in those towns, which frankly
Right.
you kind of do anyway, because you have to attune to them in order to be able to teleport to them. But yeah, the fact that fast travel is not just locked behind fairy stones, that I don't mind. It's the fact that you have to
Port
get
crystals,
these
yeah.
port crystals and set them up, and the port crystals are few and far between. That's the issue that I mostly have with that system.
Yeah, I do too.
Same, yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of people had issue with like the microtransaction, because I think
Yeah.
you can buy a port crystal.
Well, yeah, I think there was like a port crystal you could buy, and it was mostly fairy stones. There were a lot of microtransactions for the fairy stones.
Yeah, because if I had
Um,
an extra port crystal, then I could just drop it, teleport back to town, and then teleport back to where I was in my journey.
Yeah.
So if you had some, extra thing, and the port crystals themselves are pretty heavy too. Like, it's just the weight. I would have tuned the weight system a little differently. Not necessarily to completely take away from what Mark was talking about having to choose, but like things that you are going to be required to have, like a camping kit, should not weigh as much as they do.
I feel like you're not necessarily required to have them. I do think that the pros and cons, the decision presented to the player there makes a lot of sense, and I do like and admire it for the most part. It really just comes down to that the heavy limitations put on fast travel, that I really take issue with.
Yeah,
Everything else I'm personally fine with. I hear you guys' critiques, and I totally get it. It's just they didn't bother me as much.
yeah.
The only thing that really got to me was the drastic limitations on fast travel. I feel
And
like they just
again,
needed to be softened up a little bit.
yeah, and again, this is something that crept on me. At first, I loved it for the exact reasons you're pointing out. It's just as the game went on, like it started to wear on me more and more.
Yeah, it started to become more and more frustrating having to walk for 45 minutes to get to, the next place that you need to go to, or this side quest that you've been chasing after.
And
Um,
not,
Honestly,
oh, sorry,
I only had one portable port crystal the whole time,
same,
and I put it in Batal.
same.
And
Yep.
I would not have mind walking everywhere, especially in the beginning of the game. I was like, I'll walk. I don't care. I don't need to take an ox cart. I want to explore this game. That's the purpose. But then when I'm facing the same enemy and I can't avoid them over and over again, that's where it drew the line for me. And I
Right.
was forced to go back and forth. Like the quest will literally tell you to go to this town and then go to this town and then go back to the town and then go to that. And I'm like, no, 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 this is too much and it's not right. I don't think it was right. I didn't like it. Yeah.
yeah. No, that's fine. That's fair. I get it.
Yeah. I guess I'm in the middle of you guys. I'm of two minds on it. I love and grew to really get aggravated with some aspects of it. Overall, though, I enjoyed it. I'm only pointing out negatives here just because we're mainly going through gameplay systems and kind of the design of the game now, and
Yeah,
like
and
those are my critiques. But at the same time, we haven't even talked really about combat yet.
well, that
Yeah,
I'm about to transition to that, because maybe potential hot take. I don't know that I cared a ton about this combat. I had a lot of issues with it, but it seems at the very least Jason has some conflicting views about that. So I'd like to
conflicting views about
hear
what the combat.
where, like, conflicting views as compared to me, where it seems you
Oh,
enjoyed the
oh,
combat a
oh,
lot, whereas I don't know that I did.
yeah,
I I only enjoyed the combat when I was fighting a big enemy and I had to do some Shadow of the
Yeah.
Colossus shit. Other than
Yeah.
that, I was
Mm.
fine.
See, I can understand that critique. Uh, so full disclosure, I didn't get the chance because I had a time limit on me. I didn't get a chance to really play around with the ranged vocations, but I did play all the melee ones to a degree. But my main, almost the entire game, was warrior. So whenever you come up to a group of warriors, or I'm sorry, a group of enemies, a mob of like goblins, you get into that rhythm that I just enjoyed so much of tap square, continuation, tap it, and you're basically just tanking an entire mob of enemies. I found that so satisfying. Even if the mobs themselves coming up as often as they do in the same spots was annoying, there was just such a great feeling to playing warrior for me. And then, like you said, Delilah, the climbing, especially when enemies get mechanics where, like, in the unmoored world, there are specific points that pop up all over the body. You got to hit, so you got to climb to get to that specific point, and managing your climbing and risking, if it's a flying enemy, falling off the top and literally dying if your character doesn't keep their grip, which does happen. Um, I agree overall that the bigger enemies are definitely the much more fun, and the mobs can be annoying. But at least playing as warrior, because I was just in the front tanking it all, and I had to hit that rhythm and get used to the timing. That for me was super fun. But I can see for what, like, thieves, as fun as Thief is, it can get really old and repetitive fast.
Let me recount my opening hour of this game as I told you guys when I started it, because I turned around on this game pretty quickly and started enjoying it, but that first hour was rough. The opening of the game, after you ride the Griffin away from the labor camp.
Oh yeah, and you're following the guy back through
You're
the road.
following this
Yeah.
guy Justin, and you come across your first mob of goblins. And this combat is like a lot different to like most action RPGs that I've ever played, at least. It definitely dares to be nothing like FromSoft combat, which I appreciate in a lot of ways, but also, like, I'm a fighter and I come across these goblins and I fight them, and Justin's like, if you're not squeamish, interact with if you can examine these bodies and you can get some fat loot or whatever. And I do that. I interact with all the goblins. I get some apples. I get maybe a couple doubloons of gold, and I turn around and Justin's not there.
God damn it, Justin.
And I don't know where he went. I have no idea. Where's this guy Justin? Um, and I from where I am, it seems there's only one path to go, so I follow that path, and there's more goblins. And I have like half my health left, and I didn't quite know about the whole
Yep.
maximum health lowering as you take damage.
I remember you fucking bitching in our group chat about that, and I was like, dude, your health permanently decreases until you rest. Yeah,
But I didn't really know that
I
until
know.
that point in the game, or until you told me about that, and I'm like,
You're like,
oh, I
dude, what the
guess that's
fuck? I
what's
can't heal.
happening.
The game's broken.
I can't. Well, I didn't say the game was broken. I just think it's bullshit that this guy abandoned me to a bunch of goblins, and I didn't really quite understand how this combat worked at first. So I'm trying to block as three goblins are like launching themselves like fucking missiles at me. Um, and trying to keep myself alive. I can't heal because my maximum health is lowered, and I don't initially realize that. And yeah, it took me longer than an embarrassingly long amount of time to get past these goblins, continue on the path, and there's this asshole Justin being like, "What took you so long?" And I'm like, "You son of a bitch. Where did you go?
Mark
Why
will
didn't you
never
help me?"
forget Justin. He'll forget Facius and Disa and all these other, the Arisen even, but not
I'll
Justin.
forget my good buddy Glindor,
Yeah.
the elf. I'll forget his name, but I will never forget Justin with two N's, the prick that left me to die to a bunch of goblins. Yeah, I had a miserable first hour with this game and its combat until I got my pawn and understood how the game worked a little bit more and started having a lot of fun with it. But I maintain, yeah, the combat is rough in a lot of ways. Jason, you've complained a lot in past episodes of past certain action RPGs that I personally think the combat is really tight and really good, and you've complained about bad stun locking. Oh man, do you
Yep.
want to talk about bad stun locking? Let's talk about Dragon's Dogma 2, because there will be several times, or many times, where a normal group of mobs, goblins, hobgoblins, whatever, will just start mauling me, and I can't do anything about it.
So I
Yeah.
know, I agree. I would agree that and I still think that it is a problem how hard you can get stun locked. Key difference: your party actually has competent AI and can literally take out the mobs for you while you're stun locked.
I wish I knew how, because they never do.
Yeah, I think it depends on what class you're playing and what kind of pawns you have in your
Because
party.
like
Yeah.
whenever I'd find myself in those situations, and then my main pawn would cast like a fucking thunderstorm on them. Meanwhile, the if I had a thief, I changed my two pawns out a lot. Obviously, as you level up, you want to get
Yeah.
more powerful. But there might be a thief who takes down a bunch of them, archers picking at them from the back. So like I was never really worried. Honestly, the only complaint I would have about the pawn AI is traversal. They kill, they fucking walk off cliffs or into water all the time.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
Yeah,
god.
I think that was patched to be less often a problem. Even after that patch, I think it was still kind of a problem. There were many times where suddenly there would be, that sound, that beacon sound, and the red icon on your map and the red on the screen of your pawn just decided to commit
but
suicide by walking off a cliff. And I'm like, why
but
did you do that?
there's another aspect to this where I didn't experience stunlock as much because I was playing warrior almost the entire game, and built into warrior is extremely high mitigate. It's built to be the tank,
Yeah,
and it increases when you use certain skills. So I can just phase through a lot of the stuff you're talking about and not be affected. And when you do get stun locked, my pawn was, my healer. I had her set. She was a, what is it? I think it's just mage, not
mage.
sorcerer.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. She had healing spells with some offensive stuff, but she would constantly run to me. I had whatever the subspecialty is for healing. She would run to me if I got stun locked and heal me up, pick me up, whatever. So like I really didn't have to deal with that as much as you did, probably because I was playing warrior the entire time.
Maybe, but even when I was playing as warrior, I felt it was so slow to take action with a lot of its
Yes, you got to
commands.
level it up. You got to level it
And
up. Yeah.
yeah, but it's even like built into the vocation that, like, it takes less knockback from enemies and stuff. But you get the right group of mobs or the right enemies against you, and I kept having problems
It's also
timing my
gear.
attacks right while also not taking the knockback.
It's
Yeah,
also gear. The knockback resistance on gear is
yeah.
super, super high for the warrior gear. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was equipping whenever I was a specific vocation, I would try to prioritize gear that was only for that vocation or for maybe that and one other, versus like the multi-purpose gear, like the very generic general
Yeah, same.
stuff
Yes.
that you could be equipped by everyone. Because I kind of wanted to role play as that vocation, and I felt the best way to do that was to equip stuff exclusive to it. Um but yeah, I had a lot of problems with Warrior in spite of its proclivity to not get as much knockback from enemies. I still was, and I was having a hell of a time trying to time and also just determine the spacing between one of my attacks and whether or not I was close enough to actually contact the enemy with it. Um, I don't know. I had a lot of difficulty with that vocation.
Yeah, I only messed around with mage, sorcerer, which are very similar and quite frankly both very boring, I think, because it takes so long to cast spells. And
Those
so by the
were
time you cast them, your pawns already take care of the enemies.
Well, it's the same thing with some of the warriors' big, heavy hitting damage. Like there are attacks that can take out entire bars. Like you got those little dots. It can go down.
yeah.
Like especially by the time you hit endgame, I hit a griffin on the head with it once. It took out like 2 bars of health. But there is timing associated, so you need to know your position, what the enemy's status is. Are they going to move? And I enjoyed a lot of that. Like that was some of the most fun I had was getting proficient with that.
Yeah, and I overall like the combat. I like being able to switch whenever you want. I like that freedom. But if I just started a new vocation and I did face the mob issue that you had, Mark, when I played as warrior in the beginning,
Mhm.
where they were just all aggroed on me, and I guess like my pawns just weren't doing enough to get them off of me, so I would just basically be on the floor, constantly having to like drink some kind of green juice, to heal myself, or fruit rubberin or whatever the hell, and I
Some
just couldn't do
amalgamation of
anything. I
meat
had
and
to
plants. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just had to wait on the floor until my pawns did something about the mob, and that was really frustrating. But once you upgraded it and you get used to the timing and things like that, I found it a lot better. But that's why I preferred thief, I think, overall, or out of all the vocations I tried, which I didn't try all of them, because I was able to like go into the shadows and then like just like hop on an enemy that didn't see me because I was like in some kind of cloak and be able to like just do a lot of DPS on them, which I preferred, while my pawns were like aggroing them. That was probably my favorite class that I tried. However, again, like I said, it's situational on what pawns you have and what your class is, because there was one time where I was playing as a mage and I had two mages with me, or I was playing as a sorcerer and I had a mage and a sorcerer with me, and then it was my pawn, which was a warrior at the time. And we had to fight a golem, which is resistant to magic. So basically, it was just my pawn doing damage the entire time, and he kept dying because it's a big giant enemy, and I couldn't do anything to help him because I couldn't do any damage. So it's frustrating in that way, that it's very dependent on your class and what pawns you have, which is why eventually I was just like, I'm always gonna have all of the classes to diversify so that I'm not having to deal with harpies like, molesting me on my head because I can't I can't reach them, or like golems that are resistant to magic if I have like a full party of mages.
Kind of shocking that we're like a little under 2 hours into this episode and not one of us has brought up the harpies yet. Until now, until just this moment.
Yeah, for melee classes, especially harpies are the fucking worst. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was why that might have been one of my. No, I think I picked archer for my main pawn initially just because I wanted an archer, but I definitely changed eventually to an archer, not just for that elven side quest, but because harpies were pissing me off. And the aerial attack that fighter gets just wasn't doing it.
Yeah, same with tank, because the aerial attack again has to be charged, so you have to time it right, but they move way too fast, and the effective the hip. I don't know if it would be called a hitbox, but the hitbox of you lunging into the air is so small when it really should be much bigger. But yeah.
And like again, the stun locking, you have a group of like 3 harpies and they all start dive bombing you. You wind up getting knocked to the ground and you start crawling around because that's a mechanic in this game. And yeah, the stun locking just really got to me after.
What vocation were you playing mainly?
So I was switching up pretty much every time I maxed one out. The only ones that I never played as were mage and sorcerer.
Okay.
I never played as the two of them, but the only other ones that I didn't max out were thief and warrior. And my absolute favorites were, and like of when I eventually unlocked warfare and I maxed out all the other like advanced vocations, I switched to warfare, and warfare is really fucking cool. It essentially lets you multi-class, and the big drawbacks are one of your skill slots has to be taken up by warfare's rearmament skill, which lets you change but cycle through the weapons and thus vocations that you have equipped, and you only have 3 additional for every other vocation that you're using. So at the end of the game, I was warfare and I had magic archer and mystic spearhand, which were my 2 favorite vocations. And I had 2 spearhand skills and 1 magic archer skill as part of my kit, and I was just cycling through the 2 of them as warfare for the rest of the post game.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of reasons why like I didn't have this problem nearly as much as you guys. I think another reason is when you level up sufficiently with warrior, you also get revivify.
Yeah, and I did get that, but I don't know.
Maybe I just got the skills that kills. I mastered it because I played it almost the entire game.
Yeah, when I got deeper into the warrior, it got better for sure. But again, you didn't miss out with sorcerer or mage, Mark, because you can't even climb the enemy and do anything, which was my main problem. I was like, oh, like you can only cast spells from afar, which I feel like the coolest part of the combat is being able to climb an enemy and beat the shit out of it on its weak point.
That was kind of another reason I didn't click with Warrior, because it's so slow, you have to time things right, and you do one attack and that attack really hits, but there's not really much like fast-paced combat, and that's kind of what I wanted more of. And like when I got Mystic Spear Hand, I was like zip zooming all over the place with the one attack. Jason, I really love how they basically made like a magic based
Dragoon.
Dragoon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I was doing like this game's equivalent of jump, like all over the place, um, just lunging at dudes all over the place. It was a
it's
lot of
funny.
fun.
It's funny you bring that up because when I unlocked Mystic Spearhand, I immediately switched to it for that reason. However, I very quickly switched back to Warrior just because of how fucking flimsy I was. As cool as
Mm,
Spearhand was, I know that like Spearhand, a lot of people thought it was OP on release because like you got that shield ability that you eventually get, and
that is OP.
plus it's plus like it's whatever you call it, master skill that you get is like ridiculous.
I don't even think I
But
used that. No, because I got the Maester skill really late. That I think that was actually my last Maester skill. So I never actually wound up getting to use it because I never switched back solely to Mystic Spearhand. I only used Mystic Spearhand through Warfare for the rest of the game, and you can't use the Maester skills as Warfare. You can only use the ones that they learn through discipline points.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just because of the slow pace, the methodical nature of it, having to pay attention and time in order to get those continuation sword skills. Even just fighting basic mobs just felt so satisfying to me.
I mean, that's the cool thing about that's like my favorite aspect of this combat, right? Is how different all of the vocations feel. They all have their quirks, their drawbacks, their pros and their cons. But they all feel like very different to one another. And I really liked how
Kind of like
they all
Overwatch
played.
with its different characters, almost like the character
Hmm.
shooters, where like it's an entirely different game almost. Depending
Yeah,
on what.
like
Yeah.
well, like just the fact that this is an action RPG, but the jobs or vocations, they all feel so unique to one another. Like Archer and Mystic Archer are nothing, or Magic Archer are nothing alike.
Right.
Archer, you can get away with using just basic square attack without aiming, and because you'll auto aim and stuff. Magic Archer, that is basically useless. It's just like if enemies are too close, you can use it as a last resort. But aiming as a magic archer is basically required, and you have a couple different like aiming styles that you can use, and the skills that you have are all like traps and elements and stuff like that. It had a very unique play style to any other vocation in the game, and it was the same with Mystic Spearhand, everything else really. Um, and then you get Warfare, which is broken as hell, but like so cool, such a cool concept.
Yeah. And I
Um,
can see why Delaila with Thief you would get really pissed off at mobs because Thief has that awesome 1-2 insta kill ability
Yeah.
where you open an enemy down and then assassinate them, but you have to do it one by one versus like
Yeah.
Warrior
Actually,
where I can group up like 5 enemies and cleave through them and just kill them in 2 hits all at
yeah,
once.
no, to clarify, Thief is the only class that I didn't have a problem with mobs because of the cloaking ability. Like they
Okay.
didn't see me, they were aggroed on my pawns. But with the warrior, I had a lot of aggro until I leveled it up.
So I eventually got to a point where I started just running past mobs if I didn't want to fight because the little mobs won't follow. The big guys will follow you like to hell and back, but
yeah.
like goblins won't follow you that far.
The other vocation I do want to call out just for how unique it is Trickster. Did you guys play with Trickster at all?
No.
No,
Oh
no.
man, I hated it until I understood it, and then thought it was really cool. But it is extremely limited in its use. Basically, if for you guys, and if no one else decided to experiment with this vocation, you get a a like an incense ball thing. It just like is constantly spewing smoke, and you don't deal any damage directly to enemies. You basically just it's essentially a tank vocation, but it's a tank in that it's constantly drawing aggro and tricking enemies into attacking something that isn't there.
Oh.
Which was really creative and really cool. And you have some skills that allow you to like buff your allies. so that they get a little stronger and can kill things faster themselves. But it's entirely reliant on your pawns doing the damage and killing the enemies. You really can't do anything yourself damage
Oh, I
wise.
see. That's frustrating.
Yeah, which I fought a dragon as a trickster, and it took
Oh
a
my god.
very long time to actually kill the dragon because and we did, we were able to do it, and it was honestly fine in the end, but it just took a very long time for the pawns to take the dragon down when all I was doing was putting out my simulacrum of smoke and having the dragon attack it and drawing it away from the pawns as they were trying to attack the dragon. It just took a long time.
Yeah.
It's a really cool, unique vocation that has some very obvious issues. But the implementation of it was very interesting, very cool.
I will
Um,
say one major thing about the combat generally, going back to the health thing, the status of of your max health and the way it decreases seems very inconsistent. So like in the end game bosses, it didn't really matter how much damage I was taking, and me and my party fucking destroyed the end game bosses. They weren't anywhere near as difficult as I thought they would be.
mhm,
Um, and perhaps that was just because had all the max kitted gear for both me and my main pawn. We were fully upgraded, and I was just fucking hammering away, swinging away. We cleared them easy peasy. But even if I took a lot of damage, I could still heal them almost max health. Whereas like early on in the game, you could take a few hits and suddenly you could only heal the halfway health. I
yeah,
didn't fully understand, and still didn't toward at the end of the game, how exactly that worked. Like
yeah,
to what degree you lose your max health.
and like what damage dictates that that's going to go down, and how much damage does that take?
Right.
How do
Because
you improve that? Yeah,
I was climbing on one of the last trial bosses and fell off, hit the ground, lost almost all my health, but could heal the max. I was like,
yeah,
wait, what? Because
yeah.
early on in the game, that would be like instant death, and it could just be a testament to like how good my gear was and how high a level I was. I don't know.
But there's not
Yeah.
really like a traceable explanation as to what
Right,
causes that to go down.
right.
I sympathize with that a lot.
Yeah. I thought it might have been like getting hit twice. So like if you lose a health bar and then you get hit again, then you lose it. Like lose the second health bar.
Oh, before you heal, you mean? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's how I interpreted it, but I wasn't really paying attention and it's not very clear.
Yeah. Since you brought up the end game bosses, another somewhat of a disappointment, and again, this could have been remedied by doing what I suggested, making the unmoored world like a halfway point for the game. We haven't even made Jason the obvious comparison. If they do that, would it be Final Fantasy VI, right?
Right.
Like
The World of
World
Ruin.
of
Yeah.
yeah, like have that transition halfway through. For many reasons, I think that would have been wise, but you brought up the end game bosses and destroying them. The interesting thing about them though was that they were kind of unique bosses.
They were the
Yeah.
most fun, even though I destroyed them fairly easily.
Mhm.
The mechanics, I had some of the most, like the snake one, the
Oh
way,
yeah.
yeah, the way that the
Yeah,
weak points kind of roll up all the way. And the
you're
way
like
it moves.
gradually building the decay up its body as you take out the weak
Yeah.
point. Yeah. Um some really unique ideas with some of those, and they were all just there at the end of the game. Otherwise you fight the same big enemies throughout the entire game. And like there was more like there was more variety with those big bosses than I initially anticipated. I honestly thought I was going to spend the entire game just fighting the same ogre, Cyclops, and Minotaur the entire time. But no, like once you get to Batal, there's griffins, there's dragons, there's Medusas that you can find. I don't know if you guys fought a Medusa. Um
Waiting, I'd never encountered one in the actual game, but I went through that area with all the people turned stone. I thought I was going to encounter one, but I didn't.
Hmm.
there's a cave there that you probably missed that has a Medusa in it.
Oh, okay.
Because I think I know the area you're talking. It's kind of like in the southwest of the
Yeah,
map.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's a cave there, and inside there's the one. There's a Medusa. Um,
Yeah, there's chimeras, there's
oh yeah,
wolves,
forgot about the
giant
chimeras.
wolves.
Yeah. Um, really surprisingly good variety in those big enemies, but overall it's like some of them have like subsets that are a little more aggressive than previous versions. Like I know ogres, there's a couple different types of ogres.
Or
Yeah, some of them are
or
armored.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was gonna say. Figuring out how to get the armor off. Yeah,
Yeah, and some are just more aggressive than past ones. There's the two iterations of dragons, et cetera, et cetera. But overall, um, those end game bosses that you fight in the trials in the Unward world were some of the most creative things, and I think the game needed more of those throughout.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it is what it is.
I agree.
There's not really much to talk about with the progression system that didn't already mention. Like I mentioned, I didn't realize there were multiple smithing styles until the second half of the game, and
I'll be honest, I didn't know that until you just said it in the podcast.
Yeah, I only knew because I was like, what are the different symbols there?
yeah. Well, I mean, for when you're just in Vermund doing upgrades only there, it's just the one symbol. So I just was thinking, okay, so that's just the upgrade symbol. No, it's like Vermund is like balanced. It balances defense, and or strength and magic attack. Um,
The elves are magic, and then Batal is
strength,
strength. Yeah,
and then dwarven style that you can unlock through a a side quest line. Is another balanced one that has a slight decrease from Vermund's stat growth, but heavily increases knockback damage or resistance. So it's like it's almost worth doing dwarven to have like your base stats might be a little lower, but it's negligible compared to the amount of knockback you're getting on your weapons. Um it's just really cool that they have this system, and I unless it's in a tutorial and I totally misinterpreted or missed it, they don't really explain it. Um and it just kind of blew my mind and also made me feel like a dumbass by the time I figured it out, because I'd already upgraded so many things with Vermund style when I would have benefited more from others.
again,
Yeah,
two minds. It's cool that that stuff is there for you to figure out on your own.
Yeah.
At the same time, it is annoying when you play 40 hours and you realize all this stuff. I
Yeah.
built for multiple playthroughs, and there are certainly people who are certainly very much diehard fans of these games.
Yeah. Yeah. And otherwise, the progression system is pretty bog standard. It's standard RPG leveling, standard get the experience points and unlock skills with it. It's
It's standard, but I think that's good because the stats very much make it. I can feel the difference in the stats versus
yeah.
other games
I
yeah.
wouldn't I
that
wouldn't
we won't
necessarily.
mention by name.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can feel a bit of a difference in growth. Usually action RPGs I do feel fall victim to not feeling that stat growth, and this one you definitely can feel it, and that's kind of a testament to I guess to its like pretty standard but tried and true progression.
And because of how expensive gear can be, especially early in the game when it's hard to get a lot of gold and there are
Yeah.
a lot of things you need to spend it on, like when you get new gear, it feels like an accomplishment.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But so I have a question, Mark. You did most of the side quests, if not all of them.
All of them, yeah.
Do you feel like the side quests made you care about characters enough? Or
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
okay.
that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, is like
Yeah.
building those relationships. It went a long way for my enjoyment of the game's story. Like I and wonder sitting here wondering like what the hell would the ending be like if you never did Sven's side quests or the Elven side quests or most of these other side quests, cuz like seeing these characters, knowing who they are and what I went through with them, like it actually really made me appreciate the ending cutscene from the true ending and seeing all these characters. And I'm wondering like, wow, they almost make these characters out to be integral and important parts of the plot. But as far as I know, you don't have to do these quests. So is this the same cutscene that everyone else sees? Because I
So
can't imagine it is.
so you feel like the quests are interesting, like the side quests are interesting.
Most of them. I mean, that's why I was
Yeah,
saying
the
that
44, yeah.
yeah, this game really could have trimmed the fat and had a really, really solid base for quests and quest lines and storylines.
Yeah.
If it
It's
had
like
just gotten rid of the boring ones.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
did.
what I did in Vermont was all interesting in terms of side quests. It's just I didn't happen to encounter a lot of the later stuff that Mark specifically sought out.
Yeah.
So the reason why I asked is because I did side quests naturally as they popped up. I
Uh-huh.
did all of them that popped up, which wasn't all of them, and all I did all of them that popped up for me, but not all of them in the game because they didn't all pop up naturally in my
Yeah.
progression. And I, even though I found some of them more interesting than like the main story, I still never loved any characters and I still never loved anything. And I know this is not like Final Fantasy VII where the characters are like the main,
Yeah.
point of the game. But I am saying that only because I wish this game was something that it's not. And I kind of wish it was like Shadow of the Colossus where you're just going from point to point in the world to fight these big bosses and that's it.
I think that's
Because
kind of what the unmoored world is supposed to be.
and I think that's why I like that part of the game the most, minus the timing thing, which gave me a lot of anxiety because I was like, I can't rest. I can't regain my health. I'm just gonna keep switching pawns and let them carry me.
Oh, that's right.
Um,
We didn't even mention that if you die, you gotta do it all over again. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, which caused a little bit of anxiety, but I managed to it was a struggle with the last trial. I think the thing that you described, Jason, the whole Wilson having to leave a pawn, like a dying pawn behind, that actually happened with one of yours. I can't remember which one. In Bak Batal when I
Ophelia.
was doing that. I can't. Yeah, it might have been Ophelia. I can't remember if it was yours or Delilah's. But
Mm.
like they were dying, but it was the Bak Batal trial, so there was like mobs of enemies, and you just at one point you just had to run away. And I
Yeah.
tried to save one of your pawns that was dying, but I couldn't because my health was already so low, and
Didn't have a wake stone or anything. Yeah.
we were supposed. Well, no, I had wake stones, but I was just like, I didn't know what was going to happen if I died because of the kind of direness of that section of the game. I was like, I can't save your pawn, and this guy is telling me let's just run, and I didn't want to fail the quest, or I didn't want to risk failing the quest, so I just had to leave one of your whichever pawn it was that was dying behind, which crushed me. And then, of course, I cross the bridge, and the bridge collapses, and we're separated from the enemies, and I'm like, oh fuck. I knew it was going to be that simple. I would have tried a little bit harder, but
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the only section where I actually had to use wake stones.
Oh wow. I wound up using mine a couple times. There were a few dragon encounters where the dragons were kicking my ass, and I wound up just using a wake stone because I didn't want to have to go through several bars of health again just to get them
Yeah,
down
that
Yeah.
to the
makes
same point.
sense.
And there's other cool stuff that happens in the unmoored world that I wish happened more in the regular world. Like just running across the Talos, and then suddenly out of nowhere your pawn takes over it, and a giant dragon comes down from the heavens, and your pawn just kills one of the fucking trial bosses for you using this
Yeah.
giant colossus statue. And
Yeah.
you're not doing anything. I thought I had to go like help her fight it, but no, my pawn just 1v1 this thing with the fucking statue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a very cool moment. And meanwhile, like two of the villains of the game, Phasis and Ambrosius, are just there with you like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is fucking crazy. It's like
Yeah.
you caused this in some ways. Why are you hanging out with me?
Yeah. I also think those were that was optional as well.
Yeah, it
Like,
is. You
Yeah, I
got to
mean
be
that
walking. If you walk anywhere near where the Colossus gets taken down in the beginning, which you do, I think, have to walk by in order to get one of the trial bosses. But yeah,
I mean
I
that I
thought
think that is one of the trials, so to speak. It's just like the easiest one because you literally don't do anything other than walk
yeah,
to it. But what were you gonna say, Delilah?
I was gonna say I thought that Colossus fight was very cool, where you're just like running around and trying to figure out a way to jump on it to hit the weak points.
I'm sure it would have been a cool fight if I actually did it, but I did the one trophy where you just use an
Oh,
unmaking arrow
right,
on it to kill it very, very quickly.
right. I
Um,
gotcha.
um,
I concur
so
with Delilah. The only thing was I was confused after a while we had taken out every point, but it keeps I think walking until it gets to the point where it's supposed to fall. I don't
yeah,
know.
well
Yeah,
That's
you're
weird.
that
supposed to like hit it with trebuchets or whatever they're called.
Yeah,
I think it no matter what, well, like once you kill it, it won't actually die until it gets to that very specific point on the map,
that's
which
what I'm
is
saying. Yeah,
which is nerve-wracking when you do the thing that I did, where you immediately use an unmaking arrow and then you have to wait like 5 or 6 minutes
Wow.
until it gets to that point and you find out if you got the trophy or not, which I did on my
Oh
first
wow.
try, but it was
oh
still
god,
like,
knowing you, that's
when is this gonna
hilarious.
happen? When is this gonna
Yeah,
happen? Am I gonna have to revert my save? I have it backed up. Oh my god, what am I gonna do? What happened? Oh, I
trophy
got it.
hunter
Okay.
life hashtag.
Yeah, really. Hey, it's nowhere near as bad as it was in the PS3 days, where it would take a good 5 seconds for that trophy to pop, and you're just sitting
Oh
there
god, yeah.
with the nail-biting anticipation of, did I do it? Did I do it?
Yeah,
But this kind of returned to that because the unlock condition doesn't happen for like I said, like 5 or 6 minutes, and you're just waiting for it to get to that very
Wow.
specific point in on the trail until it finally collapses and you realize, okay,
yeah.
I got it, I did it.
But I guess the only reason I brought the whole Talos thing up because more stuff like that throughout the game would have been cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure, for
agreed.
sure.
Hardcore.
Yeah. I have a section here in the notes to talk real quick about the controversy that was surrounding this game's launch. I thought a lot of it was real fucking stupid. um, Delilah mentioned it a little earlier, or maybe it was Jason, I can't remember. The
No, it's Delilah. Yeah,
microtransactions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with the portcrystals, yeah.
Yeah, the port crystals, the fairy stones, the other stupid bullshit. Guys, it's a Capcom thing. They've been doing this shit since I think Resident Evil 7. It's not stuff you have to buy. It's not stuff you have to engage with. Um, it's literally just, and it's not the devs. That was the biggest issue I had. A lot of people were coming down on Itsuno for this. They didn't mandate this. The
Capcom mandated. Yeah,
the execs, the suit heads, they're the ones that said, "Hey, we might be able to make a little extra money if you guys put this in your game." And they don't really
Yeah.
have a say in that. They're forced to do that.
I get it, but they could have also put more port crystals
Well,
everywhere.
no, I agree. I definitely agree with that. It definitely, but like the question becomes, is the lack of port crystals because that's how the game was designed, or because they want you to kick $3 in to get an extra one? I don't think the latter is the case. I definitely think it's the former, and it's just kind of a questionable design choice. But
yeah. It's not like other major franchise games like Bungie and stuff where um like with Destiny, where like they'll start with a little Leververse shop and then slowly you notice skins and things that would have normally been obtainable in game are suddenly in the store. Same with like Overwatch
yeah,
and a lot of it's not like that. At the same time, I understand people's anger because of how prolific these things are becoming. And I guess to some extent you want people to take somewhat of a stand even if
I
it doesn't do anything, just on the principle, so that remember back in the day, it all started with horse armor in
yeah.
Oblivion
yeah.
But the pro and that's fine. I agree with that. Like, this is it's a predatory practice that 100% should not be in the game.
because you're essentially removing what back in the day was content,
Yeah.
unlocking skins by doing things in game. Yeah,
Or at least putting up the question of whether or not the game is designed if the game design is changed to incentivize buying these things for
right.
real money.
With certain currencies being harder to obtain. Yeah, right.
Right, but the problem is going after Itsuno and the dev team is not the right move.
Oh no, no, I totally agree. Yeah,
Yeah, and like it, especially when this stuff has been in other Capcom games that Itsuno had nothing to do with, like every Resident Evil since Resident Evil 7. Um, and Monster Hunter probably has this stuff too. To keep it within the fold of Itsuno, Devil May Cry 5 has this. You can pay real money for red orbs. Why would you ever do that?
because
Like,
believe it or not, and they keep doing it because believe it or not, there are an extreme minority of people who do pay lots of money for this
and
stuff.
it's not even that they're doing it because, oh, I really want that stuff. It's because they're falling for the trick that Capcom wants them to fall for. It's
Not
a
even.
publisher decision.
They're just people with money to spend too.
Well, that's true.
Again, that's yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's also true. But my point being is, the dev team had nothing to do with this decision, because it's been happening in Capcom games for 7 years. Ones
I
that Go ahead, Delilah.
sorry. No, I
No, no,
was just
no.
gonna say, I think that it definitely is overblown. It has been happening. Doesn't make it okay. It still sucks. It's still
Yeah.
bullshit. But what made this game, I think what lit the fire for this specific game is the port crystal. Like I know I keep
Yeah.
bringing this up because it cuts out hours, right? And
Mhm.
I'm a fan of playing the game to earn things, and Resident Evil and in other things obtaining those things is a lot more achievable and takes less time, I feel, than than obtaining a port crystal
Yeah,
in this game.
not getting a port crystal to the end game. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it was a bit more difficult to accept than it is in other Capcom games, because it is kind of an essential item that is very rare. Whereas the other Capcom games, it's like just play the game, you'll get the stuff, you know?
Yeah,
And
or
yeah,
it's
you can play this game and get the stuff. It's just gonna take way longer.
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like almost like I don't think the devs intended it, their design. They designed it the way that they designed it for purpose. But the specific thing that became monetized was a massive quality of life for people who didn't want to engage with those long treks. Yeah.
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 I mean, to be fair, a lot of that stuff is in like the Resident Evil microtransactions too. Like you can a lot of the microtransactions in, I think, pretty much every one of those. There's like those things that you can unlock from completing certain challenges or certain playthroughs in the Resident Evil games since 7 that like improve your defense or improve your strength or your attack power or whatever. Things that you would have to work to unlock, you could just pay to get an early unlock and not have to actually do the unlock condition. Um, like that stuff exists too, and that's essentially another quality of life thing. But it's more a quality of life thing that involves skill versus a quality of life thing that involves time. And
Yes.
time, I definitely recognize to a lot of people is much more precious. Um, so I,
Yes. And I also feel like to that you can beat Resident Evil just fine without those quality of life things, whereas
yeah,
this you could, it's gonna take hours, and that goes back to the time. So like you don't really need those things in the Resident Evil games, whereas a port crystal is pretty necessary in this game, or else you're gonna be spending hours just like walking.
yeah. Like I said, like time is viewed, the value of time is viewed much more highly, I'd say, and that definitely paints an ugly picture when you consider that you can pay what $3 to get an extra port crystal. I get it, I do, but the main thing I'm harping on is like a lot of the criticisms were leveled at the dev team, and I genuinely do not think it's the dev team's fault, and I think that controversy was very ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um,
Gamers definitely overblow things and start making like death threats and just go overboard. It's like, oh wow, with all this time you could have just gotten another port crystal.
yeah, right. Um, and like it becomes especially jarring when Resident Evil 4 came out last year, was lauded, everyone loved it, and it had pretty much the same shit again. The importance of a port crystal aside, it had microtransactions with early unlocks, quality of life shit, and people were like, oh, of course they added this stuff, but no one gave as much a shit as they did when Dragon's Dogma 2 decided it was going to have this stuff.
The funny thing, I never even I don't even know where I would have engaged with any of these microtransactions. I don't know. I'm guessing it's on PSN.
Yeah.
Um, so like you would have had to look for it, which I found kind of funny because it
Hmm.
never even like popped up in my face like it wouldn't say Destiny or Overwatch.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
any like with any of these things, it's not like in game that you would go to that menu. It's all within the PlayStation Store.
Yeah.
But the other controversy was none of us can really speak to this very well. It was that there was a lot of hype both from the dev team and the community surrounding this game ahead of its release, and seemingly there was a lot of sentiment that it was a disappointment overall. The improvements from the first game weren't as big or vast as they kind of built them up to be or hoped that they would be. Um Again, we don't have that context necessarily, but that also did seem like it was a bit overblown, just based off what little knowledge of the first game I have. I don't know if you guys had any opinions about that.
Yeah, I didn't
No.
play the
Yeah.
first game. I was actually surprised to see though how much hype there was for this game. I didn't realize Dragon Dogma was so beloved. I mean, there were many people playing this game. It was super popular in the beginning, and I overall think it didn't warrant the popularity. Like I did enjoy it, but it wasn't that serious to me.
Yeah.
Having seen it through, but I actually have no idea why it was so popular. So.
I mean, from what I know, like the original Dragon's Dogma is kind of it is kind of revered and beloved as like a Western inspired Japanese RPG. Or really, it is to me it is a Western RPG just developed by a Japanese developer.
Mhm.
Um, but it's one of it's just one of those ones that is so highly regarded by the community. So getting a sequel to it, and not to mention Capcom's never been bigger than they are right now. They have become a massively successful, massively popular publisher and developer, and justifiably so. So for this like cult classic RPG to get a sequel that no one ever expected to get, I could see why the hype could kind of be a little high for that, but I was a little surprised by it by myself.
I can.
I
I,
actually
oh, I was just gonna
no,
say I can also. I hadn't even not having played the first one. I can maybe see it because as we've been saying again and again throughout this talk, the game feels like an older game
Yeah, it
in
does.
in
yeah,
both good ways and bad ways.
yeah, yeah, and I could see that the desire for that being pretty high, in an era where we don't get many of those. Um, I also totally forgot. Did you guys remember that this got an anime adaptation released on Netflix like
Oh,
several
I
years back?
forgot about that.
I
Yeah.
totally
Didn't even
forgot
know.
about
Was
that.
it any
Yeah.
good?
I think so. I never watched it because I didn't really have an attachment to the series. I kind of want to watch it now. Um,
Yeah.
there was also a Japanese MMORPG. It was Japan only that released in like 2014 or something. I think it's since shut down, but it's kind of interesting that that was a thing that kind of came and went, and it's kind of exclusive only to that country.
Right.
Um, kind of a shame for Western fans, especially given that it's again ostensibly a Western RPG just developed by a Japanese studio.
Right. Um,
Um,
there's something I feel like I want to clarify because I can see how my perception of the exploration in this game versus my perception of the exploration in Final Fantasy Rebirth can seem contradictory. I just want to clarify that I much so prefer this, where I'm exploring and it's not telling me where to go and I'm figuring things out and looking things up to like figure it out, than I do to have like things on a map telling me where to go and doing things that have no relevance. It's just the slog of the structure of the main road with all the mobs that bothered me about the game, and not having access to those port crystals early on to alleviate that.
yeah, and for the record, as the panel's resident Final Fantasy VII product defender, I did very much enjoy this world structure a whole lot more than I did Rebirths. Because of that reason, because I wasn't being overloaded with icons and a to-do list. It was very much, if I go this way and I find a thing, cool. If I don't find a thing, cool. It's not on
Yeah,
my list of shit to do.
exactly.
But because of that reason, I wanted to seek that stuff out. I wanted to find it, and the exploration just felt that much more special. There's something to be said about discovering things for yourself.
Yeah.
And if there's a method later that you can obtain to find things easier, great. There's an augment from Mystic Spearhand, no, Trickster, that lets you hear like a kind of like a little beep sound and see the glint of the seeker's tokens
Yep.
when you're
Mm,
exploring around, and that thing was so helpful because
nice.
eventually I had to get 80 of those for a trophy, and running around in the world sometimes it's not very obvious that there's a seeker's token nearby. So having that little radar that would blip and tell me, hey, there's one nearby, go find it, that was really helpful.
Yeah.
So like things like that make it easier to find stuff, and you have to unlock that stuff later in the game, like that's fine. But the exploration is just so much more special than having icons on a map and a to-do list of things to do. Definitely find that to be much more interesting.
Yeah, totally.
But I still liked Rebirth a lot. So what are you gonna do?
I definitely like the characters more in Rebirth.
Yeah, right. But hey, for more information on that, go listen to our 3-hour spoiler cast on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth if you
Yeah.
played that game. Is there anything else you guys want to bring up before I go to the final question?
No.
No.
So I'm kind of going to alter this final question a little bit. I mean, I kind of am curious to know, like, by not playing the first game, the first Dragon's Dogma, and then playing this, like, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but did you feel like you were missing like key or like really important stuff from not having played that first game, either from a gameplay perspective or from a narrative perspective? Um, did you feel like you were missing something? And more importantly, does playing Dragon's Dogma 2 make you want to go and play Dragon's Dogma 1?
No and no.
Yeah, no. Yeah,
Okay.
no and no. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean it seems like maybe there were some meta elements that might have hit harder in this game, but ultimately, this game is so gameplay focused that why would I want to go back to something that would probably be inferior from
Yeah,
a perspective, which
I
is
got you.
the heart and soul of, for me at least in this experience, why I
Yeah, me
enjoyed it.
too. If I cared more about like the characters and the quests and things like that, I would have potentially wanted to go back, but I only cared about fighting big things.
I'm kind of on the opposite spectrum. I do want to go play the original game now. Something that I neglected to bring up when we were kind of talking about Rothius and more specifically the Seafloor Shrine. And if you haven't played the first game
I
or
heard
looked,
this. There was
yeah,
this,
or
yeah.
read things like I did, the Seafloor Shrine is seemingly one-to-one a location from an important location from the first Dragon's Dogma, Grand
That's
Soren.
cool.
So there are like deep connections to that first game and that game's world and stuff. And kind of plays into how these games are parallel universes of one another, and that there's kind of an infinite parallel universe. Like, I don't want to really call it a multiverse, but just like that's kind of how they make this world permeate, and how they kind of make it so that they can do something different with each one while having it so similar, is that they're all iterations on one another. And in
Yeah.
this case, seemingly the world that we play in Dragon's Dogma 2 is one where the cycle went on for a really long time, to the point where the whole world changed, but remnants of that old world still remain.
Mhm.
um it makes me interested in going back for sure. But not keen not to do that too soon, because I did spend like 96 hours on Dragon's Dogma 2.
Oh my god,
I'm
yeah.
frankly ready to move on to our next game.
Yes.
Yep.
Very excited to move on to our next game, which will also have a controversy section for us to discuss.
Yay.
Woohoo! But
I really know nothing about this next game other than the controversy I've seen online. So
yeah, and
I'm
that was
actually kind of
mostly because I was in the chat like, have you guys been following this? This is fucking insane. It's so incredibly stupid that people are mad, but people are mad. But anyway,
Of course they are.
first things first. Jason, what's the Kwasnicky rating on this guy?
you know what? A solid 7 golden beetles out of 10.
Oh
Gold?
wow,
I mean,
Remember 5 being average.
yes,
that's
yes,
actually way higher than I thought.
yeah,
You
It's
don't
it's
often
really the
give high
gameplay.
scores.
Well, that's because a lot of the games we do are very story centric
Mm,
focused.
we're in a spoiler cast, so
Yeah.
makes sense.
So the story weighs a lot more. And
yeah.
honestly, like I've gone back and listened to some of our older episodes, and I would change scores in retrospect,
Yeah,
slightly. Um, but I think because of how gameplay centric and how much fun I had moment to moment in the gameplay loop, my frustrations aside, which I've talked about, and how much I enjoyed my 40 hours with this game, I can't complain. Solid 7. There were definitely things that could have been better. But I just had a lot of fun.
good.
I feel like I wouldn't have had as much, or I would have had more fun had I been not been in such a time crunch. Unfortunately, there were specific circumstances with
Yeah.
time limit we had to play this game, so I had to finish it real fast. But
We're
Yes.
busy adults, it happens.
Honestly, it's my
Yeah.
my cry with most games nowadays. I don't
Yeah.
have time to sink in to enjoy it fully the way I'd like to.
But
It's
yeah,
been
honestly,
84 years since Delaila got a platinum trophy.
Seriously, all year I haven't earned one. Oh, it's so
but
sad.
at the end of the day, like I did like when we started with the story elements, I was like, I just wanted to get to talking about the gameplay and exploration
Yeah.
because, yeah,
That was that was the shining moment.
and that was kind of like refreshing in a way, having that kind of experience, which is
Yeah,
one I've had in so long.
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. All right, well there you go. Seven golden trove beetles out of 10.
Yo, I ate so many of those.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too. They were delicious. Delaila, just plug in the YouTube channel. Assassina_san, right?
Yeah. I'm posting boss fights in the next game that we're gonna talk about.
Hey Jason, what is our next game that we're talking about?
Stellar Blade,
Oh
and it is
yeah.
totally not near Automata.
It
And
No,
totally
I was just
is.
all aside after I saw the controversy, I looked at some opening bits from the gameplay, and I just immediately got near vibes.
Yep, that's why there were the IGN did an interview with Yoko Taro and I forget his full name, Kim something, the director of Stellar Blade. Like a lot of comparisons have been drawn. Apparently those dudes are friends, and obviously Stellar Blade is very clearly inspired by Nier Automata. So
Hey, I'm all for that. You know that
Mhm.
yeah, well I guess you'll have to listen to the next episode to find out if it lives up to that comparison. So tune in next month to find out about that. If you liked this episode, please, if you're listening on YouTube, thank you so much. Please like the episode, subscribe to the channel, share the show, leave us a comment, tell us what you liked, tell us what you didn't like. Tell us how far off we are about the lore of Dragon's Dogma if you're a big veteran of Capcom's cult classic series. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, again, thank you so much. Please rate and review the show. 5 stars preferred. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you didn't like. We hope that you tune in next month for our Stellar Blade episode. And as always, thanks for listening.
Hi.
goodbye, everybody.